p.m. Friends, we would like to remind you of Halloween. First, please change your profile name to your name, underscore, your church, your university, or affiliation. Second, please make sure to keep your microphones muted during the discussion to avoid unnecessary noise. We also encourage you to turn on your video if you are able. And lastly, there will be a time for question and answer later. You may raise your virtual hand or chat your questions and comments in our chat box to be acknowledged. Thank you.
Humans are willed by God. They are imprinted with God's image. This reality encourages a positive attitude of absolute respect for life that is rooted in this God-given human dignity. It leads to the promotion of life in which peace is ever present. And when this value of human life is being threatened and directly attacked, God's image is disrespected and affronted as well. For that is what human beings are. We are created in the image of God.
President has ruled out the resumption of talks with the
Says
CPP.
the CPP-NPA has no problem with Duterte's proposed federalism, so long as
talking about our country, my country, their
Pangulo,
country.
para walang dudahan, dito na gagawin ang peace negotiation. Pwede din po siya.
On a new approach,
National
pursuing
Democratic
President
Front with the
has
Ecumenical says the CPP-NPA has no
I will never be ready for any round of talks.
Namumuhay sa katarungan.
Respeto sa soberanya ng Pilipinas.
Pantay na karapatan at oportunidad para sa lahat ng kasarian.
Pantay na oportunidad at sapat na pasahod para sa lahat ng manggagawa.
Libreng edukasyon.
Ayuda, hindi bala.
Access to proper healthcare.
ang kalinaw para sa ako mao ang serbisyo sa katawhan nga walay mga hulga.
Resume peace talks.
Humans are willed by God. They are imprinted with God's image. This reality encourages a positive attitude of absolute respect for life that is rooted in this God-given human dignity. It leads to the promotion of life in which peace is ever present. And when this value of human life is being threatened and directly attacked, God's image is disrespected and affronted as well. For that is what human beings are. We are created in the image of God.
The President has ruled out the resumption of talks with the
Says the
CPP.
CPP-NPA has no problem with Duterte's proposed federalism, so long as
Talking about our country, my country, their
Pangulo,
country.
para walang dudahan, dito na gagawin ang peace negotiation. Pwede din po siya.
On a new approach,
National
pursuing
Democratic Front with the
says the CPP-NPA has no
I will never be ready for any round of talks.
namumuhay sa katarungan,
Respeto sa soberanya ng Pilipinas.
Pantay na karapatan at oportunidad para sa lahat ng kasarian.
Pantay na oportunidad at sapat na pasahod para sa lahat ng manggagawa.
libreng edukasyon,
Ayuda, hindi bala. Access to proper healthcare.
Ang kalinaw para sa ako mao ang serbisyo sa katawhan nga walay mga hulga.
Operasyon Peace Talks.
Once again, good afternoon to everyone. Again, we would like to remind you of the following. Please change your profile name to name _ your church, your university, and your affiliation. Second, please make sure to keep your microphones muted during the discussion to avoid unnecessary noise. Third, we also encourage you to turn on your video if you are able. And lastly, there will be a time for question and answer later, so please, you may raise your virtual hand or chat your questions and comments in our chat box to be acknowledged. Thank you.
Humans are willed by God. They are imprinted with God's image. This reality encourages a positive attitude of absolute respect for life that is rooted in this God-given human dignity. It leads to the promotion of life in which peace is ever present. And when this value of human life is being threatened and directly attacked, God's image is disrespected and affronted as well. For that is what human beings are. We are created in the image of God.
The President has ruled out the resumption of talks with the
Says the
CPP.
CPP-NPA has no problem with Duterte's proposed federalism, so long as
Talking about our country, my country, their
Pangulo,
country.
para walang dudahan, dito na gagawin ang peace negotiation. Ready din po siya.
On a new approach, National
The
Democratic
President
Front with the
has
Accompany says the CPP-NPA has no
I will never be ready for any round of talks.
namumuhay sa katarungan,
respeto sa soberanya ng Pilipinas.
Pantay na karapatan at oportunidad para sa lahat ng kasarian.
Pantay na oportunidad at sapat na pasahod para sa lahat ng manggagawa.
libreng edukasyon,
Ayuda, hindi bala. Access to proper healthcare.
Ang kalinaw para sa ako mao ang serbisyo sa katawhan nga walay mga hulga.
Operasyon Peace Talks.
Humans are willed by God. They are imprinted with God's image. This reality encourages a positive attitude of absolute respect for life that is rooted in this God-given human dignity. It leads to the promotion of life in which peace is ever present. And when this value of human life is being threatened and directly attacked, God's image is disrespected and affronted as well. For that is what human beings are. We are created in the image of God.
The President has ruled out the resumption of talks with the
Says the
CPP.
CPP-NPA has no problem with Duterte's proposed federalism, so long as
Talking about our country, my country, their
Pangulo,
country.
para walang dudahan, dito na gagawin ang peace negotiation. Ready din po siya.
On a new approach, National Democratic
President
Front with
has,
the
Actually, says the CPP-NPA has no
I will never be ready for any round of talks.
Namumuhay sa katarungan.
Respeto soberanya ng Pilipinas.
Pantay na karapatan at oportunidad para sa lahat ng kasarian.
Pantay na oportunidad at sapat na pasahod para sa lahat ng manggagawa.
Libreng edukasyon.
Ayuda, hindi bala. Access to proper healthcare.
Ang kalinaw para sa ako mao ang serbisyo sa katawhan nga walay mga hulga.
Resume peace talks.
Muli po, magandang tanghali sa ating lahat. Tayo lamang po ay naghahanda para sa ating Facebook Live, kaya tayo maghintay lamang po ng kaunti. Para po sa mga hindi pa po nakakapagpalit ng pangalan, ay ilagay po natin ang ating pangalan, underscore, at kung ano ang kinabibilangan nating organisasyon, simbahan o paaralan. Maraming salamat.
Humans are willed by God. They are imprinted with God's image. This reality encourages a positive attitude of absolute respect for life that is rooted in this God-given human dignity. It leads to the promotion of life in which peace is ever present. And when this value of human life is being threatened and directly attacked, God's image is disrespected and affronted as well. For that is what human beings are. We are created in the image of God.
Once again, good afternoon. Let us now prepare our hearts, minds, and souls for our opening liturgy.
Gather now through the virtual space, bearing visions of peace.
We carry dreams for a just future and life abundant and full of dignity for all.
We hear narratives of unpeace and injustice. We have been witnesses to some in our own community.
For peace is not silence and war's absence, because when human dignity is neglected, there is surely unpeace and injustice.
What shall we do when there is unpeace? What shall we do if we hear narratives of unpeace and injustice in our own communities? What shall we do when the voices of the afflicted, oppressed, and marginalized are silenced and maligned by those who are in power?
The scriptures give us these words: open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy.
Come then, let us build an altar of peace based on justice.
And let us worship the liberating God of history through hymns and songs, prayers and praises, through acts and works that continue to the building of God's reign on earth, the reign of just peace, life abundant and filled with dignity for all peoples. Let us praise God in song.
God of peace, God of justice, your works made manifest through the ages, from slavery and oppression, you liberated humanity.
God of life, God of peace, you gifted us with human dignity from any form of dehumanization. You called to us to liberate the people. God of justice, God of
compassion,
you have strengthened and encouraged us to stand against the evils of greed and to side with the oppressed.
God of peace, God of comfort, come, grace us with your presence, renew our commitment to your peace, and help us live and walk daily to do justice, to do kindness, and walk humbly with you. Siya nawa, hinaot pa.
Unaware of our actions and our apathy that causes the worsening condition of unpeace in our society today, we now pray.
God, we have truly sinned against you and our neighbor when we chose to be silent amid injustice and unpeace, and when we allow the powerful to silence those who speak for their own rights and for the rights of others. Forgive us when we chose to close our eyes and cover our ears from the societal problems and inhumane acts happening around us. Help us by your Spirit to face the world's evil and greed, and to break the silence that continues to sow fear among us, that we may speak of your truth and your justice to all peoples.
Break our spirits and our beings, O God, of many chances that we may have the courage and strength to be compassionate to those who need you the most, those in the margins, the oppressed, the enslaved, and those taken advantage of by the ruling systems and powers. Break us into pieces and let us find you in the brokenness and in the pains and struggles of the people. In your name, O Christ, we pray. Kabay pa.
Be restored through Christ's victory over death. Arise and be the light of Christ. Anchor your hope in the resurrection of Jesus, that you may rise up from the grave of apathy. Speak the truth and live up the prophetic witness in this country and world victimized by tyranny and patriarchy, oppression, and slavery in all its forms.
Kapayapaan, 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 kapayapaan,
kahirapan, kapapayapaan, kapapayapaan, kalungkutan, kapapayapaan, kapapayapaan, kaguluhan, kapapayapaan, kayanin mo, kakayanin ko, kapapayapaan, kapapayapaan, kahirapan, kapapayapaan, kapapayapaan, kalungkutan, kapapayapaan, kaguluhan,
kapayapaan, kapayapaan, kayanin mo, kakayanin ko. Kaya pa kapayapaan, kaya pa kapayapaan, kaya pa.
Ika'y pag-asa,
Kaya pa kapayapaan, kaya pa kapayapaan, kaya pa.
kayanin mo na.
Kapayapaan, 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 kapayapaan,
Kaya mo pa ang kahirapan.
kapayapaan,
Kapayapaan, kaya mo pa ang kalungkutan.
kapayapaan,
Kapayapaan, kaya mo pa ang kaguluhan.
kapayapaan, kayanin mo, kakayanin ko. Kaya pa kapayapaan, kaya pa kapayapaan, kaya pa.
Ika'y pag-asa,
Kaya pa kapayapaan, kaya pa kapayapaan, kaya pa.
kayanin mo na.
Kapayapaan.
Tapos ka na dyan, Ron?
Maria?
God's peace is based on justice, the reign of life abundant, where human dignity is upheld and is at the center of the ruling structure's agenda. God's peace be with you and with all of creation. Let us share God's peace to one another. Kapayapaan, kalinaw.
Kapayapaan, kalinaw.
Kapayapaan, kalinaw.
Kapayapaan,
kalinaw.
Kapayapaan, kalinaw.
Kapayapaan, kalinaw.
Kapayapaan, kalinaw.
Kapayapaan,
kalinaw.
Kapayapaan, kalinaw.
midst of sacrifice and difficulties, in the most dangerous hour and uncertainties, we'll serve you, O Lord, we'll follow your words and preach the living gospel to free your people. In the midst of infamy, against your holy name, in the face of the enemy, we exalt your greatness. We'll serve you, O Lord, we'll follow your words and preach the living gospel to free your people. With the message of truth, freedom and justice, with the message of love and peace. The message of truth, freedom and justice, with the message of love and peace. Not even the darkness can stop us to serve you. All forces of evil will vanish again as we call on your name. Live up with your words and preach the living gospel to free your people. The message of truth, freedom and justice, with a message of love and peace. With the message of truth, freedom and justice, with a message of love and peace. With a message of love and peace.
Kapayapaan, kalinaw po sa ating lahat. Thank you everyone for your participation in our opening worship. A pleasant afternoon to all. Welcome to the first PEPP National Ecumenical Youth Gathering for Peace with the theme, The Peace We Want, Life and Dignity for All. Why are we holding this activity? Natanong po ba natin ang ating mga sarili? Why are we gathering today? Friends, ako mga kabataan, this gathering seeks to be a safe space for the young people to share their perspectives on peace and its challenges. Let us open our eyes to see and our ears to listen as we immerse ourselves into deeper understanding of God's calling to respect our human dignity and to why young people should speak about peace. But to further discuss the deeper and wider goal of this gathering, the newly ordained Reverend Carlene Nomorosa, Youth Desk Coordinator of the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, will lead us in the objective setting to align ourselves towards this event's bigger aim. Reverend Carlene?
Yes, hi. Magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Salamat, Pastor Hazel. At higit sa lahat ay magandang hapon, magandang mga kabataan, magandang mga babae at magandang mga kalalakihan. Magandang hapon sa ating lahat, sa mga kasamang mga kabataan at kasamang mga taong simbahan, sa lahat ng mga pare, mga madre, mga pastor at obispo na kasama ng ating mga young people ngayon na nakikinig at nakikiisa at makikilakbay sa ating 2 araw ng Ecumenical Youth Gathering for Peace. Palagi kong naririnig noon sa simbahan nung naka-local church ako ay maraming mga issue o topic na pinangingimihan. No, yung naririnig ko madalas, wag muna nating talakayin yung issue na yan. Hindi pa handa ang church. Wag muna natin talakayin ang issue na yan o topic na yan. Baka mabigla ang mga kabataan. Wag muna ngayon. May pag-aalinlangan kasi pinag-iingatan ang pananampalataya at nagdadalawang isip sa kahandaan ng mga kabataan. Pero maraming mga kabataan sa aking pagpapatuloy ay maraming kabataan sa aking pakikilakbay sa mga kabataan ay marami sa kanila ang malalim na ang pangunawa at malalim na ang hugot, no, doon sa mga iba't ibang issue sa loob at labas ng simbahan. Kaya naman kung sila ay ang ating pakukumpasin at patitimunin, no, ay baka mas magbukas ito ng maraming oportunidad para sa atin at para tayo mismo bilang mga kanilang mga pastor at namumuno din sa simbahan ay makita ang malawak na kakayahan ng ating mga kabataan. Ngayong hapon, let me share with you the concept of this activity and the objective. So in last year, in April of 2020, during the height of the lockdown as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the government unilaterally terminated the peace negotiations with the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. It has since launched an all-out war with the NDF, the New People's Army, the Communist Party of the Philippines, and organizations it causes as front organizations. The breakdown of the GRP-NDF peace negotiations has also led to unbridled red tagging of government critics, church people and churches, youth and youth organizations, and individuals who voice out their concerns regarding the country's worsening situation. We're not exempted from this practice with the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict or the NTF-LCAC. At alam natin, no, itong mga nakaraan ay narinig din natin ang kanilang mga pahayag. But as we listen and act upon what God speaks of, and as we progress along the way of a love which gives, receives, and serves, we are continually called to be instruments of protecting human lives and rights and finding increasingly effective ways of conflict resolution. And the youth are professed agents of this peace and transformation. Ecumenical young people have been actively participating in dialogues and discussions concerning peace and conflict transformation through the advocacy programs and activities initiated by the Kalipunan ng Kristiyanong Kabataan sa Pilipinas or the 3KP. So makikita po natin kung gaano kaaktibo ang mga kabataang ito sa diskurso, sa mga kampanya at sa mga panawagan patungkol sa kapayapaan. The National Council of Churches in the Philippines, the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform, among others, and we also partner with the Student Christian Movement of the Philippines. Ito pong mga grupo ng kabataang ito, mula sa 3KP, sa NCCP, sa SEMP and the PEPP ay nagbuo ng ganitong klase at nakita yung mga pangangailangan kung paano pang mas masabayan ang mga kasama nating kabataan upang mapalalim ang pangunawa natin sa usapin ng kapayapaan. Kaya po, this National Ecumenical Youth Gathering for Peace is a chance to understand the young people's perspective on peace and their challenges, as well as to involve them into a more immense advocacy today. So, we will unravel why God speaks about respect for human dignity and why young people should speak about peace. Nakita na po natin yung kanilang ginawang video at mga maiksing panawagan. At sa mga susunod na araw, ngayong araw hanggang bukas, ay makikita natin, maririnig natin ang kanilang mga perspectives, ang kanilang mga panawagan at ang kanilang naisin para sa kanilang sarili, sa pamilya, sa ating simbahan, tigit lalo sa ating bayan. Kaya mga kasamang kabataan, we would like to hear you more and we will journey with you. At salamat for allowing us, your elders, the adult in this room, for allowing us to be here and for allowing us to learn with you. Muli po, magandang hapon sa ating lahat.
Ayan, nakaka-fresh naman kapag youth desk coordinator ka, Reverend Carlene. Again, thank you, Reverend Carlene. And to acknowledge our very active participants this afternoon, may we call on Father Christopher Ablon of the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform, CORE. Father?
Hello! Hindi yata yan yung pinasa ko na picture. Anyway, magandang umaga po sa ating lahat mga kapatid. Salaam para sa lahat ng ating mga kapatid na Moro sa buong bansang Pilipinas. Of course, kapayapaan para sa ating lahat. And greetings ng kalinaw para sa mga taga Mindanao, pakigdait sa mga Sugbuhanon o paghidait para sa mga Hiligaynon. At sa lahat, ang salaam din pala mga kapatid is also spoken by our brothers and sisters in Palestine. Yes, we welcome lahat po. Napakadami pong naka-register, kaya bibilisan po natin ang pag-welcome. Welcome po natin sina Archbishop Emeritus Antonio Ledesma, co-chair po ng PEPP, Dr. Muriel Montenegro, at lahat po ng mga PEPP core group na kasamahan namin na nandito. Galing po sa CBCP, Episcopal Commission on the Young People or the Youth, Executive Secretary, welcome po kay Father Kuni. At saka mga friends and other groups, galing po sa Center for Peace and Conflict Studies sa Cambodia. At saka mga kaibigan natin galing sa De La Salle Medical and Health Science Institute, sa mga kaibigan natin mula sa APAI, ICF Hong Kong, sa mga kaibigan natin mula sa International Coalition for Human Rights Europe Chapter, sa St. Augustine Academy ng Pampanga, sa Handmaids of the Sacred Heart of Jesus Congregation, sa Forum Peace Service, sa YMCA Albay, YMCA Cagayan de Oro, Roman Catholic Parish of San Antonio de Padua, DHRD ng San Pablo, at saka CBCP Social Action Commission. Sa mga kaibigan natin galing sa Kapayapaan for Just and Lasting Peace, galing sa EQ Voice, galing sa PKKI EMLF, sa mga YIFI galing sa Diocese of Batak kasama ni Bishop Emeline, sa mga YIFI galing sa Diocese of Tarlac kasama si Bishop Tindo Ranoho, sa mga YIFI galing sa Diocese of Cagayan de Oro kasama si Bishop Bert Kalang, sa mga young people coming from United Church of Christ in the Philippines Christian Youth Fellowship ng South Luzon Jurisdiction kasama si Reverend Ismael Kataag, sa mga kapatid natin sa CYF pa rin galing Northeast Mindanao Jurisdictional Area, at saka sa National Office ng CYF, sa mga kapatid nating kabataan galing sa United Methodist Church, galing sa KUE, galing sa Philippine Lutheran League, galing sa Episcopal Church of the Philippines, ISKEP, Sa Iglesia Unida Evangelica, Vice Chair ng National Council of Churches of the Philippines na youth, si Ms. Kay Almario. Sa mga kapatid natin na mga kabataan galing sa HIV and AIDS Support Group, galing din sa Marilac Center, at sa mga 3KP na national in scope, at saka sa Student Christian Movement of the Philippines ng National Capital Region, malapit namang matapos, sa Movement Against Tyranny, sa Global Catholic Climate Movement, sa CBCP ECEA, at saka sa Episcopal Church of the Philippines, Cathedral of the Resurrection. Galing naman sa Archdiocese Youth Apostolate of Cagayan de Oro City of the Roman Catholic Church, sa Prelature of Infanta Youth Ministry sa Diocese of Marbel, sa Cebu Diocesan Youth Coordinating Council ng Archdiocese of Cebu, at sa Prelature Youth Ministry ng Batanes, sa Mount Carmel Parish, DAS Toledo City, sa Diocese of San Fernando, La Union, sa Jóvenes de Matarling, San Vicente Parish Prelature of Isabela Basilan, sa Isabela City sa Basilan, sa Uni Harmony Partners Manila, sa Archdiocese of Lipa and Asian Social Institute. Kasama din natin ang Diocese of Bacolod. Welcome po sa inyong lahat. Sa mga hindi po natin natawag or na-acknowledge, magpabatid lang po. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon sa lahat.
Maraming salamat po, Paddy, sa inyong pag-mentions ng ating mga participants for this afternoon activity. And sa ating Zoom po ngayon, meron tayong 122 participants sa Zoom. Pero marami po sa atin dito ay group sila na magkakasama. So again, we are very grateful to all the participants gathered today. So to welcome all of us here, may we call on Reverend Dr. Aldrin Penamora of the Philippine Council of Evangelical Churches and is also part of the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform.
Salamat Hazel at salamat din Father Chris at Reverend Carlene sa mga pag-welcome at sa message. Very exciting naman ito ang ating event ngayon. At nakikita natin that marami po na narito kayong mga kabataan at ang nakaka-excite dito napi-feel namin. Sabi nga ni Reverend Carlene, mga adults, lalo kaming bumabata pag nalalaman namin at nakikita na ang kasamahan natin ay pawang mga kabataan. But alam nyo, kung titingnan din natin yung sinabi ni Prophet Joel doon sa chapter 2 verse 28, ang sabi niya, afterward, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men and women will see visions. Dinagdag po natin yung women. Siyempre, patriarchal noong time ng Prophet Joel. But ito po na alam natin that this was fulfilled nung Pentecost, that everyone who receives the Spirit of the Holy Spirit by believing in Christ ay makakakita daw po ng visions, the young men and young women. Alam niyo po, very revolutionary yan dahil yung pong panahon na yon, ang sinabi ni Prophet Joel yan ay mga adults lamang ang mga nakaka-receive ng mga ganong klaseng pangitain at mga revelation ng nagaling sa Diyos. Ngunit ngayon po, we acknowledge that every one of us, kahit po, lalo na po mga kabataan, because you're seeing the world through a different set of eyes. Hindi po ba? Ang gagaling, ang dami niyo pong mga kaalaman ng ating mga youth, mga young people na kaming mga nasa adult at post-adult ay hindi na po namin nalalaman. But anyway, alam niyo po, I just want to share this yung passage dun sa Matthew 26 to crystallize ito pong ating gawain ngayong ito pong darating na dalawang araw. It's in Matthew 26. If you remember, when Jesus was malapit na po siyang ipagkanulo, ay siya ay a woman came to anoint him with, yung mamahalin na perfume. At yung kanyang mga apostles were against it. At ang sabi naman ng Panginoon ay, the poor, why are you bothering the woman? Nagalit, kumbaga ay nag-disagree ang ating Panginoong Jesus doon sa idea ng mga apostles na dapat daw ibigay na lamang yung mamahaling perfume ay kung magkano man yon na ibigay na lamang sa mahirap. Ngunit ang sabi ng Panginoon, the poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. Ngayon po, kung titignan natin yung words na yun, the poor you will always have with you, para bang passive, para bang inaccept na lang ba ng ating Panginoon na yung kahirapan, injustices, degradation of human dignity, pinabayaan na lang ba ng ating Panginoon when He said that? Actually, hindi po. Because He was quoting from Deuteronomy 15. At doon po sa Deuteronomy 15 na yon, ang sabi ng Panginoon, and this was about, economic justice, the distribution of resources. Ang sabi ng Panginoon, there need be no poor people among you, for in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess as your inheritance, He will richly bless you. Sabi ng Panginoon ay, if only you fully obey the Lord your God and are careful to follow all these commands that the Lord is giving you today through Moses, ano po yung words. Ang sinasabi po ng Panginoong Jesus doon, when He quoted this from Deuteronomy 15, dapat daw po ay walang mahirap kung tayo po ay lahat ay ginagawa natin ng ating parte at we are dealing with justice toward one another. Kaya po, tayo po ngayon ng ating pong event na ito for the next 2 days, actually, we are uniting ourselves with the ministry of our Lord Jesus. Nung sinabi niya that it was, yung the poor will always have with you, it was actually a rebuke na dapat po sa ngayon, if there is justice in the land, dapat po ang mga naghihirap ay hindi na naghihirap if only we are following the commands of the Lord, particularly pertaining to matters of justice, righteousness, and respect for human dignity. Kaya po itong ngayon at hanggang bukas, nawa po ay ma-bless tayong lahat sa pag-aaral at pakikinig at pag-uusap tungkol po sa ating pakikisa sa misyon ng ating Panginoon to respect human dignity for all. Salamat po. God bless each one and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Aldrin, sa iyong wonderful welcome at sa iyong hamon na din po para sa ating lahat kung bakit tayo narito sa ating activity. So now we are going towards the focus of our event, which is peace. And of course, a keynote speaker will be giving us a primer of our discussion on peace this afternoon. And to introduce our speaker, may we call on Mr. Klein Emperado.
Our speaker today is the international representative to the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform and also serving on the Education Committee of PEPP. Master and educator with a Master of Divinity degree from the Union Theological Seminary in New York City. He holds a second Master degree in Mission Studies from the Ecumenical Institute of the University of Geneva in Switzerland. Organizations in both the United States and Europe and the Philippines. He was an active youth leader for the Presbyterian Church USA, a staff of the World Council of Churches in Geneva, Switzerland, and the coordinator of the International Relations Office of the United Church of Christ in the Philippines from 1990 to 2000. Presently, he is the director of the Justice and Peace Center of Silliman University Divinity School in Dumaguete. Kobe says he is very excited to be with handsome and beautiful and talented ecumenical youth of the Philippines. The ecumenical youth is where he developed a passion for peace, justice, and activism. He is hopeful that through our efforts, dedication, and commitments, we will be instruments in turning our nation into a land where justice and peace will finally reign. Help me welcome Pastor Carlton Kabataan.
Good afternoon. Good looking, handsome, beautiful, intelligent, ecumenical youth of the Philippines. Pastor Kobe here, and we're going to have some time together where I'm going to try to present to you some reasons why peace talks. But I greet you from beautiful Cebu City, where I am in quarantine because I have decided to do some travel. And in doing travel, you take the punishment of some quarantine, difficult time. And so that is the reason I am here on screen with a recorded message for you, because it is not easy to do online interaction from quarantine. So I hope you will bear with me, but I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform for organizing this very special occasion, and most especially for taking the risk of inviting me. And so I want to use the time with PowerPoint. So I am gonna phase out of this and shift over to a little box on the side with my PowerPoint. So let's take it away. Let's get on with our presentation. All right, I hope you see me up here on the right side, and I am going to take you through this particular presentation that we're calling Why Peace Talks as our keynote. So again, thank you for this time we have together, and I hope this will prove to be meaningful for all of us. I want to say that this picture in front of you is a time right after the election during 2016, when the peace talks were still healthy and ongoing, and you can see how constructive peace talks can be. But today what I want to do is I'm going to talk about 6 reasons, and I'm going to take 3 of those reasons from a story I'm going to tell, and then I'm going to take 1 reason from a little bit of history that I will share, and then finally our last 2 reasons from the present, our story of what's going on right now in the Philippine setting. So let's take it away. Let me take you to the story that we are going to walk through, and here we go. Once upon a time, there was a village right along the river, a beautiful little village. And in that village was a carpenter. Oh yeah, let's give the carpenter the name, Mr. Suave. And Mr. Suave was alias problem solver. Well, one day, Mr. Suave noticed that there was a child sort of floating down the river, almost drowning. And of course, being the problem solver that he went into rescue mode and rescued that child, all right, and brought it back in. And a day or so later, another child was floating by, and Mr. Suave got back into that rescue mode and brought that child back safely, and saw that it was good, and then began to realize there seemed to be more children floating down, and maybe we better organize some volunteers to help out. And so they constructed some rafts, and volunteers began to help out, and rescues were made, and other volunteers going out and helping take these children coming down the river. And it was becoming such a big thing that they decided they even better invest in maybe a kind of evacuation center hospital to put the children in that were coming down, and things were going pretty well, but children kept coming down the river, and volunteers were starting to get frustrated and tired, and so finally, as more and more came down, our friend Mr. Suave said, wait a minute, I better get on my trusty Calabao and go on up the river to find out what is the reason for these children floating down. And so Mr. Suave went on up on his Calabao, going along, and finally arrived to a village looking like it was troubled right by the waterside. And when he got there, he actually met a friend named Sonia, who he had known before. And he said, Sonia, are the children coming from your village? And Sonia said, yes, they are. So he said, why are they coming from your village? And she said, because we have been pushed right to the edge of the water, and this is the only space we have to live. And he said, why have you been pushed to the edge of the water? And Sonia said, because an Australian mining company has started mining up in the lands where we were on the hill. You remember we lived up there once upon a time. And they with them brought in big tractors and big machines to push us down, and finally pushed us, and all we have left is to live right here along the river. And along the river, the water gets strong and high when the rain comes, and it drags our things and even our children down the river. Mr. Suave thought, aha, so the root cause here is this Australian mining company that has taken the land up where they had been. So he asked Sonia, Sonia, what have you done so far? And Sonia said, well, we tried to negotiate a bit. We tried to talk, express our concerns, but they had some big security and more security put up against us, sending us back down. Then we even tried a little bit of confrontation. We threw some stones and started to get upset and started to react. But they responded. They seemed to have connections in high places with big airplanes, bringing bombs and dropping them over us. And so we had to back down. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, said our friend, Mr. Suave. Said, Sonia, you wait a minute. I will be back. I will call on some help. Suave left. In a while, Suave came back with a group of people organized to begin to advocate. Sonia, what we're going to do is we're going to advocate for a demand, and a demand that will call for peace talks. Peace talks. Sonia said, why? We have already been asked by the barangay to do some localized peace talks, and nothing happened. Well, of course, how can you expect localized peace talks to address a big company like an Australian mining company? Come on, there is no chance. The peace talks I am talking about that we have to demand and advocate for are national in scope. National in scope. They are formal and national, because at national, this is a conversation that is going to go on between the principles of the state and the principles of National Democratic Front. And those conversations result in new laws and new policies. And you see, new laws and new policies not only will help us here locally, but it will help every indigenous community around the country, because when it's a law for the whole country, everybody benefits. And secondly, it is binding forever. But what Sonia said, but what if our voice is not heard? No, Sonia. You see, there's a principle of equity that goes on in peace talks. And equity means that different stakeholders' voices are brought into the discussion. So indeed, we may not get everything we want in a peace talk, but it will assure us that agreements will be based on fairness for all the stakeholders and based on human dignity to all life. Sonia said, so you're trying to tell me that we are going to need to advocate for national formal peace talks so that national laws, national policies will be implemented that will affect everybody in the country, and that will be binding so that it goes constitutionally through. And then we will be assured through this equity principle that the agreements will reflect the different points of view, including ours, and it will be based on fairness to all stakeholders and human dignity to all life. Is that what you're saying? Yes, Sonia, that's what we are saying. That is why we are going to demand and call for national peace talks. Sonia, it's time to get to work together. We need to demand peace talks now. Wow. End of story, guys. So my first answer to why peace talks, I'm going to draw from the story. And the first point I want to make is because peace talks address the root cause. And addressing the root cause, you fix the symptom. The children coming down were simply a symptom. Yeah, we can respond. But unless we get to the root cause, we can't really end this crisis that is before us. Peace talks address the root cause. Secondly, peace talks have a principle of equity where everyone gets a voice and everyone gets a share. We may not get everything we demand, but we are going to be assured that we will get some, and things will begin to change favorably for human dignity. And finally, it's binding. That's very critical. It's not just a barangay piece of paper. It's a national paper. It is part of the constitutional change. Laws and policies will be changed for everyone and forever in favor of human dignity. Therefore, we call on peace talks. 3 first reasons. Now I want to take you a bit into the idea of a little historical flow. I call our country today a peace talks terminated Philippines. A peace talk terminated Philippines means the peace talks have been suspended, been terminated. And I don't need to ask you or explain to you what it looks like when the peace talks have terminated. But let me flash up a few pictures. Killings, illegal arrest of activists, lumad killings, destruction of unions, killings of lawyers. I could go on and on and on, and you know the same story. But I want to take us back, because what I want to explain is that what I have observed as I have followed the peace talk process is that when peace talks are suspended and terminated, things violently increase. When peace talks are ongoing, things begin to become much more peaceful and human dignity is respected. So I'm going to take you back to Mindanao, 2014. The peace talks were suspended. And in this part of the country, which is just a part of the Philippines, I want you to look at the number of encounters between the government and the armed forces of the Philippines and the Communist Party, New People's Army. Let's take a look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And that is only up until November, and I stopped. Whew. This is a little bit more of 1 encounter each month. An average of 1 encounter each month, which you know will affect communities with collateral damage. Villages will be affected. It's not only the combatants that suffer. It's the communities, the people around the communities, those suspected of being involved. And let me take it right into 2015. Still a suspended period of time. And let us observe, and I'm only going to select the illegal arrest of those persons bearing the security and immunity passes. which have been given to consultants. All right. January 9, arrest. March 9, arrest. June 1, arrest. August 1, arrest. Let me take it to extrajudicial killings. June 28, killing. And then probably one that you were able to follow because it made such national news was the tragedy on September 1 in Lianga, where Emerito Emok Samarca, who was director of the Alcadev school, was assassinated during the period of their school Founders Day, at which time Jonel and Dato Bello Zinzo were also present. In front of the children, assassination takes place. Horrific act. Violent situation. And so here is the point. When you look at the history of the peace talks, you will recognize that when talks are happening, the violence and the respect, the violence decreases and the respect for human dignity rises. When the talks are terminated and suspended, violence increases and respect for human dignity is lost. So historic fact check, when peace talks are suspended, there's an increase in violence, an increase in collateral damage of civilians, increase in arrests, and increase in tears. Why peace talks? Number 4, historical fact check. Suspended or terminated peace talks equals the escalation of violence. But let's review a bit where we've gone. Why peace talks are first 4? Because it addresses the root causes, not just the symptom. So address the cause, you fix the symptom. Secondly, why peace talks? Because it has a principle of equity. Everybody gets a voice. Everyone gets a share. Number 3, it's binding. It becomes a national law. It becomes and affects the whole country. So one indigenous community or one labor union is not gonna be helped, but every labor union and every indigenous community, and it's gonna be binding forever. And 4, historical fact check. When peace talks are suspended and terminated, escalation of violence increases. So let's go on into our story. And as I said, this one is going to take a little more of your focus and attention to follow, all right? I want to say that there is a poison uncontrollably spilling out into our country. And I call that poison a culture of martial mentality, okay? And it has 2 potent ingredients that are killing us. The first is the narrative of the dehumanized. And the second is the narrative of combat victory. And I will get into explaining both of these situations. Let's begin with some evidence. I wanna present a little evidence here. On the evening of June 22 last year, almost a year ago, it was the first time that it was going to be possible for the president to begin to go out and be able to visit the situation around the country. We had been on strict lockdown, everybody, and now on June 22, an announcement was made that the president was going to take a trip out to make a visit. Who was he going to visit? Was it going to be the frontliners who deserved some support from him, some encouragement from him? The choice went this way. I quote him, "In the coming days, I intend to go around the country. Magbisita ako, I will visit. Magbisita pa ako sa mga kampo ng military. I will visit and I will continue to visit the military camps." This has defined a priority of this president. You see, let me bring it also to looking at a budget. Let's just look at the budget itself for the national defense and the armed forces of the Philippines from 2016 to 2019 alone. There's been an increase of 56%. That is a priority. And for the Philippine National Police, there has been an increase in the budget of 78%. That's huge. And for personnel, wow, for personnel, if you are a uniform wearing personnel, an increase in your monthly paycheck of 100%. Nothing of this type of boom for the military institution has happened since another period right after martial law from 1972 to 1975 by a former President Marcos. He increased the national defense by 63% in those first 3 years and increased personnel from 55,000 to 165,000 in the first 5 years. Another big boom. If you wanted to have a good profession, maybe go into the military. That seems to be the message that's being sent. But it didn't all start that way. I want to remind us that it actually began in 2016 very, very hopeful, especially for the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform. The president made some very important promises. General amnesty to all political prisoners, and he went and he reached out to those that were struggling and those who were in the movement. Secondly, he invited representatives that were recommended by the NDFP into his cabinet, and he made it happen. 3 particular persons are of note, and I have them noted right there. Number 3, he called for a reconvening of the government peace panel and to start the peace talks. That was huge. And he came through on the promise. The first 2016, there were peace talks that were ongoing. Into 2017, a total of actually 4 constructive. They were going to meet for the 5th, but it collapsed after the 4th and waiting to start the 5th. 4 constructive peace conversations that looked just like that. It was it was an exciting time. But fast forward to November of 2017, and there was the signing of Proclamation 360. That proclamation was the declaration or the proclamation to terminate the peace talks with the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, National Democratic Front. Everything began to collapse. And then furthermore, about 2 weeks later, on December 5 in 2017, the president formally declared the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army a designated terrorist organization. Wow. Tragic, tragic. What actually went wrong? What got into his head? Paano ba ito nangyari? Kumbaga, sa Tagalog ba? I want to suggest that there was the spilling of the poison. And I'm going to try to explain that. And I want you to zone in with me very carefully. What is the narrative of the dehumanized that I call the first ingredient that is killing us? The narrative of the dehumanized, to understand it, we need to take a step back. And I think it's very, very nice illustration of this narrative. If I step back to 1986, the 1986 period was a happy moment. EDSA revolution had happened. Martial law was long gone. Marcos was no longer around. The military had been placed back under civilian control. And we were in the process of building a new country under civilian leadership, reestablishing the constitution and governance, from the time of what had been martial law. And so the first formal peace talks were taking place in 1986. But tragically, all those beginning conversations ended with what was called the Mendiola Massacre on January 2, 1987. 17 farmers and individuals were killed on that day, marching legally at a time when we were hopeful of a new day. The farmers wanted to come to Manila to be heard and that their voice be listened to in relationship to their demands for what is needed for their life in their situation. The investigation showed that it was the Marines combined with the integrated national police who began firing those shots as they guarded the Mendiola Bridge. What went wrong? What got into their heads is the question. How could they? How at this time when things were going so positively? I want to suggest again, it is a lingering illness that I call is part of the culture of martial mentality and the narrative of the dehumanized. In a book, and it's been written in many places, but this particular book speaks of it very clear. This David Livingston Smith book, Less Than Human, actually talks about how our institutions during different times, in order to prepare people to destroy other people, like at times of war, they will begin to indoctrinate your mind to believe a narrative that the enemy is hopelessly evil, irredeemable, and dehumanized, and their extermination will serve the common good. They begin to indoctrinate to the idea that the other, the enemy, is not a person anymore. It is a hopelessly evil, irredeemable, dehumanized something where extermination or killing, extermination will serve the common good. You see, the soldiers on Mendiola could not see anymore innocent farmers, for they had been indoctrinated so long that they, even after the change of administration, even after it was a civilian government and we were building relationships, what they saw in those farmers who were rallying as activists, enemies that were hopelessly evil. When we think about how could they have shot, how could they have opened fire, indoctrination is a good explanation, and many writers, and that book explains it very well. What is indoctrinated is the idea that these activists were communist enemies, as they call them, hopelessly evil, irredeemable, non-human, and extermination, destroying, will serve the common good. Let's fast forward, actually, to just a few weeks ago, on March 7, it was Bloody Sunday, and we know on that tragic day, 9 activists, organizers were killed in southern Luzon. A tragic moment, and the question becomes, how could they? These are unarmed, these are persons just like you and me. How could they? The answer becomes the danger of indoctrination. In the mind of those who went there, this is what was going on. They are activists and they are communist terrorists, hopelessly evil, irredeemable, non-human, and extermination. They're killing them will serve the common good of the country. It's tragic. It's tragic when it is being held within the institution of the armed forces. That's tragic enough. But what is really alarming, and this is why I want you to listen to this carefully. It is alarming and urgent that National Task Force, on ending local communist armed conflict, or LCAT, is being promoted and developed. And I'm going to tell you why. Because while we can assume that the president now, surrounded by mostly military, has been indoctrinated to believe in the narrative of the dehumanized and will look at the other side as non-human. What is frightening is that with the whole of nation approach of LCAC, which will draw in and bring in government agencies, LGUs, civil society, and other stakeholders in a national peace framework to defeat the communist terrorist group. In other words, it is replacing peace talks. Our culture, our people is in danger. This will destroy us as a people for years to come because it is spreading the indoctrination outside of the institution of the armed forces. This is what's happening as I go around the country. There are planning workshops, bringing in government agencies, the post office, the city tourism, the sanitation department, all coming together for these events where discussion is happening. Seminars are ongoing with barangay officials, with city councilors, with governors, and schools are being visited and conversations are ongoing with one message, with one common message of LCAC, and that is communists are terrorists. Friends of communists are terrorists, hopelessly evil, irredeemable non-human. Extermination of them all will serve the common good. This is a tragedy for our country. See, LCAP and why it's so dangerous is moving the narrative of the dehumanized from within the walls of the national security institution, where we know it has existed and where we know that's the indoctrination that's going on there, out into the public space, out into civil society for all to consume. It's going to create a culture where we cannot see anymore a person who thinks differently, who believes differently than us. As a human being, we will be dehumanizing anyone who might even go out and do a food pantry because it's suspected of being a friend of the communists who are terrorists. It's a tragedy for our country. Why peace talks? Why? And this is my fifth. To stop the spill of this poison. LCAP is dehumanizing the other. It's destroying our culture, our people. Peace talks, on the other hand, does the opposite. It humanizes the other. It gives the chance to listen to the other side, to know that this person is not a terrorist. This person is not evil. This person is just standing up for the rights and for the justice and for the human dignity of all people. We've got to stop this spill. I'm going to take you now to my last, and that is the narrative of combat victory. Stay with me. Don't go. I want you to stay with me. This is important too. What is the narrative of combat victory? The war can be won in combat. That's the answer. When you begin to believe that the war can be won in combat, you have embraced the narrative of combat victory. You know, as a longtime member of PEPP, now an educator for PEPP, on the core group of PEPP, the Philippine Ecumenical Peace Platform, I get many people, nagtatanong sila, Kabi, bakit pa? Bakit pa? Why do you continue? You know, it's obvious that those that have surrounded the leadership of the country have already indoctrinated those folks into believing the narrative of the dehumanized, and now also trying to indoctrinate on the narrative of combat victory. The implementation of LCAC is widespread. It is convincing our post office people. It is convincing our teachers. It is convincing our students tragically of this false narrative of the dehumanized, destroying our culture. But why then do you continue? And I say, that's all the more reason I continue. Because alam ko na hindi nila kaya. Hindi nila kaya abutin ang kapayapaan sa paraan ng gera nila. They cannot make it happen. They cannot reach peace by the war that they are waging. And let me give you just a simple example. And I could cite 100 examples if we had all day, but I'm going to give you a simple example. Just last January, out of the Armed Forces of the Philippines Information Exchange, which is an official intelligence network that puts out data, it put out a post that said, here are some of the University of the Philippines students who became members of the New People's Army and were captured or died. This list had a number of people. It was so ridiculous a list that the University of the Philippines chancellor put out a letter saying, do not red tag former student leaders. This is absolutely wrong. These people were not NPA, were not captured, had not died. It was so embarrassing for the AFP, they had to recall it. And a number of their staff were actually reprimanded quite seriously, right? Maybe you can remember. Million, right? Here it is. Millions ay ginagastos sa budget nila. They have a huge budget on intelligence. But how is it that they're still making these kinds of crazy mistakes? Mali-pali pa rin. Kaya alam ko hindi nila aabutin ang kapayapaan sa gera nila. Yes, they can hurt us, they can kill us, they can destroy us, but we can't depend on their policy, on their methodology to bring the country to peace. Let me give you the real score on combat victory, all right? I'm gonna do a report card or a scorecard between those conflicts that have been resolved in combat victory, those conflicts that have been resolved in peace talks, and those conflicts that are still unresolved, okay? Historically, we have had 8 insurgency groups waging struggle against the government if we count from 1954 to 2021 to now. 8 different groups, all right? How many of those 8 different insurgency groups have been resolved by combat victory? Just 2. The Hakbalahak Rebellion in 1954 and the Mountie Uprising, which you will remember since you were already very much alive, in 2017. 2. And both of those were conflicts that were isolated in location, and both of them had the support coming in from the United States to quell these uprisings with the Philippine Armed Forces of the Philippines. Now, how many have been resolved in peace talks? Interesting to note, 3. The Moro National Liberation Front Peace Talks Agreement in 1996, the Revolutionary Proletarian Army Peace Talks Agreement in 2002, and the Muslim Islamic Liberation Front MILF Peace Talks Agreement in 2014. Score: 2, 2, 3. 3 by peace talks, 2 by combat victory, and guess what? We still have 3 more that they're going to have to deal with. The Abu Sayyaf group, the Bangsang Moro Islamic Freedom Fighters, and the Communist Party, New People's Army, National Democratic Front. 3. And let me note that the Communist Party, New People's Army, National Democratic Front is not an isolated Central Luzon or City of Marawi conflict. It is national. And do you think that given the track record, given the competency, that you can bet on combat victory? Where would you put your bet? Combat victory or peace talks? We know and we have seen repeated incompetence of this institution of the armed forces. We see that their track record from 1957 to today is only a victory of 2, resolved through combat victory. Honestly, hindi nila kaya. And you know, to say that the narrative of combat victory is something we can believe in is a false narrative, a false narrative. It is a horrifically false narrative. Ang kaya lang nila mga kapatid is to prolong the suffering of the people, wasting the people's money on illusions of peace. Guys, ang kaya lang nila is to prolong the suffering of the people, wasting the people's money on illusions of peace. It is a false narrative. Why peace? Why peace? Number 6, and here it is, stop the lie. Combat victory is a false narrative. Don't let them convince you on that. You perpetuate that lie of the armed forces and the government, you perpetuate the suffering. We have to stop this lie. So let me just bring us back to the 6 again, just so I'm closing up now. First, why peace talks? Because peace talks will address the root cause. It will address that Australian mining company up there and not just the children that have been victims and symptoms rolling down the river. Address the cause, you fix the symptom. Secondly, equity. It will be a process and a principle of bringing in different ideas, bringing in different stakeholders. And yes, we may not get everything we want or demand, but we will be ensured that it will be something that will be toward human dignity and where everyone gets a voice and everyone gets a share. It will be the possibility of peace based on justice. Third, why peace talks at the national level and not localized peace talks? Because we have to change national laws and national policies. What can a local barangay do against this Australian mining company in localized peace talks? Give me a break. We need to be demanding for the resumption of the national peace talks because we need to be changing laws and policies, and we need it to be forever and for everyone and to stay that way. Number 4, history fact check. We need to be calling on peace talks because it is historically proven, and I can show this in another presentation if you want me to come with you and talk again, that whenever the peace talks are suspended or terminated, wow, the violations of human rights, the extrajudicial killings, all of this explodes out of the can into dehumanizing our earth and our world and our people. Suspended or terminated peace talks equals the escalation of violence. Get back to the peace talks brings us down in terms of the violence and gives us hope for a possibility of change. Number 5, stop the spill. The narrative, the false narrative of the dehumanized, that we are becoming a culture and it is leaking out through LCAC all over the country, that we are going to believe that anyone who has any inclination to look like a communist because they are giving food out to people at a food pantry is dehumanized. And when you are dehumanized, you are not worth living. And you are to be exterminated because it's for the greater good of the country. Peace talks, on the other hand, goes the opposite direction. It humanizes the other. It provides for the possibility for us to learn, to say, you may disagree with me, you may have another ideology than me, but I am not here to destroy you because We can share. There is enough in the Philippines to share. And we can create a Philippines that has some of your concerns and some of my concerns, and we get it together in peace talks, and it can happen. But we've got to stop the spilling of this indoctrination that is going out rampantly through LCAC in all of these meetings, seminars, and activities. And finally, number 6, we've got to stop the lie. We've got to stop the false narrative that combat victory is possible in the bringing of peace. 1957 to 2001, the score right now is 2 combat victory successes, 3 peace talk successes. Incompetence, it's everywhere. Let me add a little bit of corruption in there. And let me add, and now you have so many of them involved in the COVID response. They are distracted. They can't deal with anything moving forward. They react slow. You see, when we perpetuate the lie, we perpetuate the suffering. We can't allow the country to believe that through the armed forces and their combat battle, peace will arrive. I just don't see it. Based on fact, based on track record, based on history. Friends, that's why we call. We call you all. Join us. Join us. We need you to become part of a process where the demand becomes ituloy. Peace talks, peace talks, resume. Peace talks now. Let's get to it. We need you. We need each one of you. We need you to become part of this big movement that we are creating. Wow. Ecumenical youth, young people, beautiful, handsome, intelligent people. We need you. Maraming salamat. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Pastor Kobe. That's a very challenging and insightful address. Let's be Mr. Suabe and Sonia. Let us demand peace talks now. Peace talks ituloy. Maraming salamat po sa inyo, Pastor Kobe. At kung tayo ay mga kabataan, mapapansin niyo yung transition na ginawa ni Pastor Kobe. Napaka-youthful ng kanyang presentation sa ating gawain ngayong hapon na ito. Muli po, maraming salamat. To further continue, meron tayong mapapanood na isang music presentation from Tubao Music Collective, ang Kapayapaan. Ayan. Maraming salamat, Tubaw. Sa mga gusto pang makarinig ng kanilang mga kanta, ay pwede silang masundan sa Spotify. Follower tayo dyan. Sana maging bahagi din tayo ng Tubaw. Wow. Sige po. We are live on NCCP Facebook page. Kaya please share itong ating activity sa ating mga groups, sa ating mga page. And to further enrich our understanding of what peace means and how it is connected to our lives and societal realities, we have invited representatives from different sectors to create a space for discussion on the effects of unpeace in our land, specifically of the COVID-19 pandemic. It will be an afternoon of stories and testimonies from our people. And to have a clear-cut discussion, a youth moderator will be joining us. May we invite Mr. Coco Alviar to introduce our guests and lead our discussion. Coco?
Hi. Hi, Pastor Hazel.
Hi.
Hi po. Kinakabahan ako pag may ipa-introduction din para sa akin, so please bear with me. But we are blessed and highly favored fellow ecumenical youth that we have invited two individuals, two young leaders who have been making a mark in society sa pamamagitan ng paggamit sa kanilang specializations and gifts. Okay? So I will introduce them one by one. Hopefully makarating na yung second panelist natin, but I request them to do an opening statement, di ba? Parang Miss Universe, after they are introduced. So let me now go on with the first panelist. Our first panelist, he went to Ateneo for grade school and high school, and then he entered the University of the Philippines to finish his undergraduate and graduate courses. In the University of the Philippines, Diliman, he went to the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy and took up anthropology. He finished magna cum laude. And then he went to UP Manila College of Medicine to finish his medical course. He then passed to become a doctor in 2016. Now he works at a local hospital and also as a community physician. He is a co-convener of the Coalition for People's Right to Health and is representing the Council for Health and Development this afternoon. CHD is working with community-based health programs across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, ecumenical youth, let us welcome Dr. Raymond Joshua Lopez San Pedro, a physician and anthropologist. Doctor, kumusta po?
Hello
Opening
po.
statement po tayo.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, siguro na-mention naman po earlier, the situation in our country continues to be not a very peaceful one, not just in terms of our politics, not just in terms of our what we see, in the media, but also in terms of health, and also in terms of getting our basic needs. No, so until nga we can be stable in terms of our health needs, in terms of our basic needs, and even our needs in our own spiritual needs as well, especially even more, no, yung ating needs to survive in our daily lives, no, including food, including medicines or access to these services, we cannot be at peace. So very important pa rin talaga yung usapin of how we should have our rights together with our call for peace and the just peace in our country.
Thank you, Dr. Josh. Salamat po sa opening statement niyo. Medyo pa-hold up po yung pagbibigay namin sa inyo. But thank you na na talagang you coped with the challenge. Okay. Our second panelist, very timely, nakapasok na po siya. Needs no introduction, pero hayaan niyo po na i-introduce ko pa rin siya. In 2017, she was the principal author of the Comprehensive Free Public Higher Education Bill, which is currently benefiting around 2 million college students. She also was one of the principal authors of Free Public Internet Access Law. Of course, alam naman natin na malaking tulong ito ngayon, lalong-lalo na sa new normal arrangement. We know her to be a staunch advocate for education, health, well-being, gender equality, good governance, employment, socio-economic reforms. She is also a mover and volunteer sa Tulong Kabataan Relief Network, isang network na tumutulong sa mga communities who are in distress, lalong-lalo na during disasters. The first female representative of the Youth Party List Kabataan, the youngest lady legislator of Congress during her first term at 26. Currently, she's part of 13 House committees and is the youngest of the Board of Trustees of the Philippine Legislators Committee on Population and Development. Walang iba kundi si Sarah Jane Ibanez Elago, representative of Kabataan Party List.
Hi, Coco. Hi, Doc Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. So thrilled to be here.
Yun po. Baka you have an opening statement po para tapatan po si Doc Josh.
Well, as the COVID-19 crisis has made clear, the decisions our leaders make impact our everyday lives and would definitely affect the future we are all bound to inherit. So we must raise our voices now and continue our conversations on societal issues and how we can contribute as young people, as a community, to uplift the lives of our kababayans in this difficult time. Thank you po.
Thank you, Representative Sarah. Ayan. So, guys, yung mga participants po natin, if you have questions, please just chat them here para maibato natin sa ating mga panelists later on, no? But to start off po, no, Doc Josh and Representative Sarah, you both have different specializations. Can you take those specializations and talk to us about the unique challenges that young people are having now because of COVID-19, particularly po si Doc Josh anthropologically, so culturally, at saka sa medical field, and Representative Sarah in participation in the arena of politics, economics, and particularly education po. Yun po.
Alright, so alam naman natin yung definition natin of youth, medyo expanded na rin naman po siya, no? It's not just the children, no, from 0 to 18 years old, no, umaabot siya even up to 35. And we are seeing during this pandemic that the most affected population of COVID are usually those aged 20 up to 34. No? So ito yung most number of cases natin of COVID. So definitely it is mostly the young people who are being infected, although hindi po sila yung usually namamatay. No? So at least merong ganon. But still, with more people being infected at this age, actually with the variants bumabata din, no, yung bilang nung those who are getting hospitalized. But overall, no, we are seeing really a harder time for a lot of the youth. Some of them have to work, some of them are studying in ways that hindi nila akalaing they would ever do in their lives. So it's been a major adjustment for a lot of the youth, and it's really been a struggle. No? So nobody expected naman na mapapasok tayo sa isang pandemic. Kaya sa gitna nitong lahat, no, napaka-bigat ng responsibilities that are being placed on the youth, especially those in the medical field as well, no, na sila yung, since the younger generations are the ones who are the frontliners, no, especially in terms of nurses, especially in terms of the physicians as well, and the medical technologists, no, so all are frontliners, even the dentists, even the therapists, no, that we are seeing. Sila talaga yung humaharap, sila talaga yung frontliners during this time, no, and they are of course the ones who are less vulnerable compared to those who have the comorbidities and yung mga senior citizens. So sila talaga ang sumasalo ng karamihan ng risks, sila yung sumasalo ng karamihan ng infections, no. So even youth like myself na mga frontline health workers, and most likely natamaan na ng COVID-19, no. Ako personally, I tested positive in March. So this is just a small amount, no, ng mga tao talaga, na maraming health workers na nag-positive sa COVID-19 trying to serve the people during this very, very difficult time. Na kulang talaga kasi yung healthcare system natin to really cope with the health of the people. So it's the younger generations who have to face all of these challenges, and hopefully in the future, no, realize na hindi dapat sana naging ganito kung naging mas maayos sana yung pamamalakad for the longest time. And hopefully this generation will be able to change that and demand, no, that we raise the bar in terms of healthcare and in terms of our livelihoods and our level of politics sa ating bansa.
Thank you po, Doc. Rep Sarah.
Even before the pandemic, there are already 4 million children and youth who are out of school. Dropout rate in college has already reached an alarming level of 80%. The Filipino youth has registered a whopping 25% who are classified as NEET or not in education, employment, or training. Isa sa 4 na mga kabataang Pilipino wala sa school. Hindi rin parte ng mga training programs or ng mga livelihood projects na meron tayo ngayon. Gayon din, walang trabaho. Kaya napakarami ng nasasayang ng mga potensyal at hindi solido yung istruktura na sumusuporta sa mga kabataan bago pa man yung pandemya. In fact, youth unemployment is 3 times higher than the overall unemployment rate. Health has major challenges in accessibility, availability, and quality as well. Essential services for mental health, as well as sexual and reproductive health services have been interrupted or sidelined in many places because of certain restrictions in travel, cargo, and mobility. There's, amid the pandemic, record high unemployment as millions of overseas and domestic workers lose their jobs, and a number of businesses and sources of livelihood are already forced into closing or trimming down their operations because of the economic recession and the unprecedented impact of the varying levels of community quarantine. Government debt skyrockets to as high as 10 trillion pesos. The economy dips at a historic low of negative 9.5% last year. We lost about 1.9 trillion in revenues. Education is in a major crisis too, with about 1 million or a million students who have opted out or dropped out of school since the pandemic hit. Challenges related to ensuring inclusive, alternative learning modalities and protection of teachers and education support personnel's health still have to be sufficiently addressed. Kaya nga sobrang halaga ng pagsasalita ng mga estudyante at ng iba't ibang stakeholders tungkol sa mga issue na to. We need to continue raising our voices for inclusive learning, for higher funding, for the needs of the new modalities in the delivery of education. We must continue raising our voices for a transparent, expedient, and equitable COVID-19 vaccination program. Napakalaki ng role niyan sa kung paano ba muling magbubukas ang ekonomiya, paano ba muling magbubukas ang ating mga eskwelahan, ang mga negosyo. Napakahalaga ng binabanggit ni Doc Josh na pagtugon, pag-aksyon sa mga pangangailangan sa sistema ng ating kalusugan. Overall, we really need to strengthen our solidarity for a comprehensive, health-focused, rights-based, and participatory approach to the pandemic response and recovery plan. Ngayon, Coco, sobrang halaga na gawin yan dahil nasa critical tayo ngayon na moment na pinag-uusapan ang susunod na economic stimulus sa loob ng Bayanihan 3. Ano ba yung mga kinakailangan pang pondohan? Una na dyan ang kalusugan, ang edukasyon, ang pagtulong sa mga nawalan ng trabaho, mga nawalan ng kabuhayan. Kailangan nating palakasin ang ating boses. Ngunit, ang pinakamalaking hamon ngayon, lalong-lalo na sa mga kabataan, young people, students, the Filipino youth are being targeted and singled out for being critical, for speaking up and speaking out against abuse, discrimination, abuse of authority of our public officials, or They are raising concerns and their position on various anti-democratic, anti-people measures of the Duterte administration. Nakakaranas sila ng vilification, iba't ibang forma ng threat at discrimination, ng atake, dahil lang sa pag-exercise ng mga karapatan. Kaya isa sa mga pinakamalaking hamon at mga mayor na kailangan gawin ng mga kabataan to ensure that we have safe and protected spaces to exercise our rights and speak up, not only for today, but as we actively shape our future. Thank you.
Thank you po. Pakita natin guys that we are up to the challenge by asking those critical questions that you want to ask our panelists ngayon dito sa ating safe space na ito, this conversation. Now, para lang po ilighten natin yung mood a little bit, no, Doc and Representative, how do you cope ba? I mean, I know, Doc, you have a lot of cases, so many episodes na parang gusto mo nang sumuko siguro. Representative Sarah, the red tagging, all these challenges, political, sometimes pine-personal ka na rin. How do you cope with all of these issues? Para lang ma-educate natin itong mga kabataan na ito.
Yeah, so hindi siya madali, no? It hasn't been easy over this time. So it's been a year. Lagpas 1 year na tayo sa pandemic, no? Minsan nakakapagtaka bakit pa ako naging doktor. Nung time na to, na parang of all the disciplines, bakit talaga ito? And ito pa talaga yung mangyayari, no? Parang although at the same time, maisip mo rin, no? Parang ito na talaga yung parang what a great opportunity na to be a physician then during such a big public health crisis. Tapos makikita mo palpak. So all the more frustrating, 'di ba? So alam mo naman kung ano yung tama, alam mo yung ano yung dapat na ginagawa kasi napag-aralan, kasi nakita mo yung mga ibang dapat naman na ginagawa para maiwasan yung sakit, and yet hindi yun yung nangyayari, no? So nakakalungkot na hanggang ngayon we're still facing the same problems that we faced at the start, and hindi pa rin nasa-solve yung mga mahalagang bagay tulad ng testing, ng tracing, na alam naman natin very important. So, all in all, paano nagko-cope? Siguro, it's really going back to what should be done, going back to ano nga ba yung tama, no? Reminding yourself, is what I'm doing the right thing to do? No, yung pagbalik natin sa pag-unawa no, ano nga ba yung dapat na nangyari during the times that we want to give up, and also siguro sa mga ginagawa din namin with our community-based health programs, going back sa community, seeing na paano ginagawa ng mga mas maliliit na communities, no, especially those who are less advantageous, no, yung less privileged, nakikita natin kinakaya ng mga ibang communities to still survive, no, na to survive and do what is right at the same time, no? So nakikita natin na yung ibang communities who are trying their best to provide, like for example yung sa community pantry, no, na mag-provide ng mga basic needs ng mga tao, na kung wala tayong maasahan, hindi lang tayo bahala na kasi wala akong kakayahan, no, na bahala na lang yung mga may kaya, sila lang ang gagaling sa panahon na to o makakakain, no? So merong system ng solidarity, nakikita natin yan na kaya pala siyang gawin ng iba, and not just in terms of food but also in terms of yung pagpapaligaya din sa isa't isa, and also yung being able to provide yung examples, no, that there are communities na kayang halimbawa po na at least sila na lang magagawa ng contact tracing, magtutulong-tulungan na lang sila na gumawa na saan pwede mag-quarantine yung ibang mga tao, no, na alam nila na kung hindi tayo matutulungan nung mas malaking estado, no, at least tayo magagawa natin bilang community. And I guess yun yung mga bagay na nakakapampalakas, no, seeing that there are these efforts by smaller communities and yet become stronger, no, than those na may kaya na. So na parang even in the middle of the hospital na nandun naman yung equipment pero hirap na hirap kang masave yung mga pasyente, at least nakikita mo na merong mga communities na kahit konti lang kaya pa rin, no, na hindi lang tayo matakot, hindi lang tayo yung susunod lang, but really may gagawin din tayo, no? May gagawin din po tayo to do things to be able to still live properly and to address the pandemic in our own ways in our communities. But of course, syempre, kailangan pa ng mas maraming tulong. Pero at least, no, nandun yung spirit, nandun yung drive, yung motivation na may kaya palang gawin. Hindi lang tayo, wala lang. Hindi lang tayo yung naghihintay na lang na mamatay sa COVID. But rather, we are ensuring, no, na yung health is not just about seeking consult, but really about actively taking part, no, actively taking part in making sure not just we are healthy, but our community is healthy.
Yes, ayan. So guys ha, madalas po namin pag-usapan kasi ang kahirapan sa ecumenical youth ganyan. And I think that's a good lens to look at it without romanticizing poverty itself, di ba? Because sometimes it's the teleserye trope. Madalas ito ang ginagamit sa mga kwentong neighborhood ganyan, huwag ka magreklamo, tiisin mo ganyan. Pero merong paraan para to see inspiration in that, but also to see that there must also be change. Thank you, Doc. Our Representative Sarah, your turn po.
All right, thank you. Si Doc Josh, he highlighted the importance of getting organized. Napakahalaga nun na sa lahat ng mga gagawin yung mga proyekto, programa, mga aktibidad, organisado at sistematiko at nakalapat dun sa mga pangangailangan ng mga komunidad o ng inyong constituents na nais natin. On a personal level, mahalaga din yung pag-take ng break. It's siguro yung gusto malaman ni Coco. Breaks are necessary, no, to reflect, evaluate, assess or what you've done, or also to celebrate, no, what you've accomplished so far. Napakahalaga nun. Karaniwan sa sobrang dami nating ginagawa, nakakalimutan na natin na i-celebrate, no, yung mga natatapos natin. Mahalaga yun, no, not only for ourselves, no, but for our membership, our constituents. Nakikita nila na lahat ng ginagawa natin may naaabot, no? At nandun sa direksyon na nais natin na makamit. No? Halimbawa, napakahalaga nung pagdodraw talaga ng points of unity, no? Para malinaw sa lahat, ano ba yung inyong agenda? Para saan ba tayo nagtatrabaho? Para saan tayo naglilingkod? Para saan tayo nagsisilbi? Sa bahagi ng kabataan, health, education, jobs, livelihood, human rights. Malinaw yun. Tapos may mga specific na mga dapat abot. Ang sunod, we also have to learn to accept pauses, no? Itong mga breaks na to, kinakailangan natin siya para doon sa mga nabanggit ko na mga parte din ng mga task natin, ng responsibility natin. Pero yung mga pauses na yan, na minsan mahirap kasi ang pakiramdam ng iba, bakit parang wala tayong ginagawa? Pero yung mga pauses na yan, sa totoo lang, sobrang halaga. Hindi lang para sa recharging, no? Pero tiyakin na nagsisikap tayo at lahat ng ito nagko-contribute dun sa ating agenda. At walang nasasayang na oras, walang nasasayang na kahit anong ambag, however big or small, from our membership and from our community. So, ayun, take a break.
Ayun. So guys celebrate your small victories kasi minsan sobrang madugo nung mga pinaglalaban natin and sometimes we feel like ang tagal-tagal pa itong kailangan nating ipaglaban para ma-achieve natin. Pero celebrate those small victories and when in doubt, ask para saan, di ba? There are questions here para kay Representative Sarah. There is an ILO statistic saying that COVID-19 has disrupted education for more than 70% of youth. Kaugnay na rin po niyan, ano pa po ang mga programa that you are currently lobbying for the benefit of young people?
Salamat po sa katanungan. If I may be allowed to share my screen, I can share with you the 5 demands from students, young people on the matter of safe resumption of face-to-face classes, the proper opening of schools, based on risk assessment and overall public health consideration, and heightened support no, for inclusive learning. Yan, hindi pala ako pwede mag-share, no? Pero ang mga calls po namin, we have 5 points. First is for additional subsidies no, for laptops and other internet and communication needs, not only of students, no, but for all education stakeholders, from our faculty, education support personnel who might need no, this additional subsidy. Number one. Number two is to ensure financing for better facilities in schools, particularly for
Representative,
water,
I think
sanitation, and
you can
hygiene.
share your screen na po.
All right. Okay. Let me just
There you go.
all right. Can you see it now? All right. Okay, tapusin natin inclusive learning, accessible education, to democratize access to student financial assistance and other scholarship programs, ensure that dorms and other facilities in our schools have the necessary tools, equipment, or whatever uh, it is necessary no, for the safe resumption of schools, assistance to personnel and schools, upholding the democratic rights of all stakeholders, and for the safe reopening of schools, yung matitiyak na may kapasidad, may kakayahan, may careful preparation para dun sa mga minimum health standards na kinakailangan sa loob ng mga eskwelahan. Lahat ng to nakadikit pa rin dun sa pangkabuuan na panawagan ng mga kabataan para sa mas pinalakas na pagtugon sa pandemya, mass testing, systemic, aggressive, contact tracing, pagtitiyak ng treatment, isolation. Kung makikita nyo dito, nakalapat yung mga resolutions na nakapanukala ngayon sa Kongreso dun sa mga particular demands din ng mga chapters o iba't ibang mga student councils, organizations, campus publication na may mga demands, not only for their sector but for their communities. One of this demand is to prioritize the vaccination or teachers and university and school personnel. Sa ngayon, nasa B1 pa rin sila eh. I recall correctly. Kung pwede pa sila maitaas no, sa prioridad pagdating sa pagbabakuna at matiyak natin na yung mga missteps na may kinalaman sa bakuna ay maaayos naman at hindi na maulit-ulit. We also have a campaign no, to uphold accords such as the UPD-ND, PUPD-ND to safeguard academic freedom and institutional autonomy of our educational institutions. So we filed resolutions no, on that and a bill to defend academic freedom and institutionalize the provisions of the said accords, not just in UP and PUP, no, but in all education institutions. Mahalaga ito para dun sa binibigay natin ng diin kanina pa na ligtas na espasyo para malaya na makaalam, makialam, manaliksik, magtanong, magsalita ang ating mga kababayan. May mga socio-economic projects din, no, such as yung mga relief drives para po sa pagtulong dun sa mga estudyante na nagsastruggle talaga sa online learning. O kaya naman, this initiative no, of ang Kabataan Party List Intramuros Chapter, the Kapit Kamay Alternative Learning Avenue for the Youth, which is an alternative school no, for children in urban poor communities who are struggling with classes or in finishing their modules. So yan po yung ilan dun sa ating mga initiatives. Pagdating naman po sa Bayanihan 3, we're pushing for an eduk ayuda, yung assistance po for the education sector na nasa 300 billion pesos. Sa ngayon po, nasa 5.6 billion lang yung kaya o yung willing na maibigay no, ang House of Representatives. Kaya kailangan pa po ng mas malakas na lobbying no, mula sa parte ng mga estudyante, ng mga guro, ng mga schools para kinakailangan na assistance sa ating education sector. Maraming salamat.
Thank you po, Representative Sarah. Quick question lang po. Some of the participants are asking how may they participate directly sa mga initiatives po na ito?
Coco, I will leave our email address in the chat box. So if you have any queries, or if you want to send us your position papers, your support statements, in solidarity with all the initiatives we've shared, then very welcome po yun sa bahagi ng.
Thank you po, Representative. Since we're running out of time po, pasensya na po sa inyong dalawa. We have just a few minutes left. Siguro, final bunch of questions para sa inyong dalawa na pagmumuni-munihan po ninyo. Given po that we have these concerns like COVID-19, plus the fact na for some people, ang kabataan ay hindi pa rin dapat, in a patriarchal society, in a very old world society, ang boses ng kabataan ay hindi pa rin po pinakikinggan. What are the practical measures that you think young people now can do para po lalo nating ma-invoke yung place natin in society and the changes that we want?
Sige, Sarah, may ma-add ko.
Go, Doc.
Ayan. Siguro one thing lang na halimbawa lang din po, no. So for example, sa medicine and sa medical community, sobrang big thing ng seniority. And that's basically kung ano din yung kinakaharap natin, lalo na ng kabataan for the longest time, kahit sa hospital man o sa pamilya o sa kahit anong gawain, no. Then in the answer, the question or yung laging sinasagot sa atin ay yung nung panahon namin ganito yung ginagawa namin, kaya dapat ganito din yung ginagawa ninyo. Nung panahon namin maayos, kaya dapat this is how it should be. No? So I think yung youth of today really has to assert itself, no, in really showing din na hindi naman pwedeng kung ano lang yung kinagawian, gano'n na lang lagi. And I think yung pandemic has really shown that na hindi naman pwedeng kung ano yung nakagawian ay gano'n na lang, no? So I think this during this time na isang napakalaking krisis para sa maraming mamamayan, talagang nakakaharap natin, no, yung ganitong mga kalagayan because may mga bagay na ayaw gawin or ayaw harapin, no, and that includes really questioning bakit nga ba ganito yung kalagayan ng kalusugan ng bansa, bakit ganito yung kalagayan ng pamamalakad ng ating gobyerno, no, na bakit kailangan may nagugutom, bakit kailangan yung mga may kaya lang ang kaya magpagamot, no. So ito yung mga bagay na I think nare-realize ng mga youth during this time, and these voices need to be heard, especially sa social media rinig naman, no, pero kailangan pa sigurong mas paigtingin by really asserting, no, that things have to change, that things have to be more secure, no, na hindi pwedeng katanggap-tanggap ng isang health worker ay minimum wage lang ang tinatanggap, no, na may mga kalagayan na kailangan tiisin, no, na wala kang health insurance o tiisin na ito lang ang kayang ibigay ng PhilHealth, na ang kalusugan mo ay hindi karapatan, no. So yung mga bagay na ito nare-realize ng mas maraming tao nitong panahon na nakikita nilang namamatay ang kanilang mga grandparents, namamatay ang kanilang mga magulang, namamatay ang mga kapatid, no, that it doesn't have to be this way. Na nakita natin yung mga ibang bansa, kung maayos sana yung kanilang health system, maayos yung kanilang welfare system ng kanilang mga bansa, sana hindi na kailangan umabot sa ganitong kaguluhan, sa ganitong kawalang plano o pagpatuloy ng isang napakalaking krisis, hindi na lang na pangkalusugan kundi pang ekonomiya, panglipunan, na talagang hanggang ngayon kailangan ng solusyon na hindi yung nakagisnan na, no, that really has to be new solutions, at nanggagaling ito syempre sa kabataan, nanggagaling ito sa mga nakaranas nitong napakaraming paghihirap sa panahong ito, no, na sabi nga nila, there are things that can only be understood by eyes that have cried, no. At ito yung mga nakikita natin, mga pinagdaanan nating mga paghihirap during this time, and I'm sure marami ng luha ang nailabas, but hopefully yung mga luha na ito, yung mga matang lumuha at yung mga nangangarap ng mas magandang bukas nga. Na sana ito yung kailangan nating mataas na diskurso ng ating kabataan, no? That our youth has to assert that we have to raise the bar on so many levels, not just in health, but also our standards for leadership, our standards for what should be done in our families, in our lives, in our communities, and in our government.
Thank you, Doc. Representative Sarah?
Yes, Coco. No, historically speaking, the Filipino youth has always been at the forefront of the fight for genuine social change. Catalyst talaga yan ng pagbabago. Dahil bakit hindi, di ba? Kinabukasan natin yung nakasalalay. Gusto natin magkaroon ng posisyon, ng boses sa mga usapin na hindi lang nakakaapekto sa ngayon, kundi dun sa kinabukasan natin. O kaya pagpupugay no, sa lahat ng mga hindi sumusuko, hindi nawawalan ng pag-asa. Ngunit huwag niyong solohin. You are not on your own. You are not alone. No? Magkakasama tayo na naghahangad na may magbago. No? Kaya yung pinag-uusapan natin kanina tungkol sa pangkapayapaan, usapin ng hustisya, ng katarungan, wala nang ibang pinakamainam na panahon kundi ang umaksyon at mag-ambaga para sa kalutasan yan, kundi ngayon. Kaya sa lahat po ng naririto, sa kabila ng mga threats, attack, ng discrimination, maski pa based on age, gender, at marami pang ibang diskriminasyon na nararanasan ng mga kabataan, kaya natin to. Huwag tayong magpadala. Let's not allow ourselves to be cowered into silence. Gusto nila manahimik tayo. Imbis na manahimik, mas palakasin pa natin ang ating boses. Maraming
Ayun, wag po tayo manahimik, no? There's elections coming up. Perhaps seek representation because young people aren't representing themselves well in all these policy making bodies, diba? We're a certain amount of the population and yet we're not that amount in representation in Congress. So perhaps that could work. Creative solutions like Patricia Non's community pantries, diba? Sobrang ganda nun. And always be in solidarity with people who have cried those tears, diba? So thank you po sa ating mga panelists. I trust naman po no na when I ask a quick question, yes, no question, and simple sentence, pasensya na po. Magagawa po natin itong huling challenge na ito, no? There's talk about a next normal, a new normal. Kung ano man po ang katawagan dito, we know that there needs to be change in as we move on from COVID-19. Is there a place for peace talks in this rebuilding, in this new normal, in this next normal? Quick answers lang po. Last statements.
So yes or no in quick sentence po, no?
Oo.
Sige pa. So yes, definitely, no, because the old normal wasn't even a good normal for a lot of Filipinos, for a lot of the marginalized communities who continue to not have healthcare and so many other basic services denied from them under that old normal. So a new normal is really necessary, and that involves asking the hard questions that are necessary and what happened when we have our peace talks.
Representative?
Yes na yes. To build back better is to build back fairer. If we truly want peace, we have to work for justice. Thank you.
And there you have it. Maraming salamat po sa ating mga youth participants na nagtanong and all those from more advanced generations na nag-participate din dito sa ating discussion. I know you look with eagerness sa mga kabataan na nandito sa grupo na ito ngayon. Thank you so much, Doc Josh, Representative Sarah. We hope to meet you again in more conversations like this. We know you've inspired young people, and we hope na ma-inspire pang mas maraming ecumenical youth to do what you do in society. Thank you so much po. And with that, I pass the baton kay Pastor Hazel. Pastor?
Salamat Coco, salamat sa ating mga tagapagsalita, kay Doc Josh and kay Representative Sara. Maraming salamat na sa inyong maikling pagbabahagi sa hapon na ito ay maayos na nailatag yung kalagayan ng panahon natin ngayon at kung paano tutugon yung mga kabataan na katulad nating lahat. Muli, ang naiwan sa atin para saan tayo naglilingkod. And hopefully, yung ating conversation on the effects of COVID-19 with Dr. Josh and and Kong Sara ay nakatulong sa atin para sagutin yung mga tanong na yan. And as we continue, let us take a moment as we digest our new learnings. Huminga tayo, magbuntong hininga, magmuni-muni. Here is a song number by representatives of Suleiman University entitled Faith and the Service of the People.
Faith in the service of the people, faith in the service of the poor. This is our response to the call of God. Faith in the service of the poor. Peasants of the field have the vision of land that is rich and free. They till the land from dawn to setting sun, yet they remain to be poor. Faith in the service of the people, faith in the service of the poor. This is our response to the call of God. Faith in the service of the poor. Workers of the cities have the vision of days and job season back. They have to work hard like machinery, yet they remain to be poor. Faith in the service of the people, faith in the service of the poor. This is our response to the call of God. Faith in the service of the poor. Women of the land have the vision of people with dignity. They work and struggle, caring for their young, hope for a nation that is free. Faith in the service of the people, faith in the service of the poor. This is our response to the call of God. Faith in the service of the poor. Students and the young have the vision of future that's bright and free. They work and study, learn the lessons past, hope for a nation that is free. Faith in the service of the people, faith in the service of the poor. This is our response to the call of God. Faith in the service of the poor. People of the church have the vision of kingdom of God on earth, a kingdom of justice and righteousness, a kingdom of joy and love. Faith in the service of the people, faith in the service of the poor. This is our response to the call of God. Faith in the service of the poor. Let us come and celebrate together, rejoice in the service of God, and give thanks for the work well done. Pray for years to come. Faith in the service of the people, faith in the service of the poor. This is our response to the call of God. Faith in the service of the
Thank you, Suleiman University. Konting-konti na lang po to enlighten us more on what were the role of churches and peace processes that we can learn from in the past. What are those we could improve as young people to contribute in the whole to achieve just and lasting peace? Let us welcome a respected historian from Ateneo de Manila, Professor Francis Gealogo. Prof?
Maraming salamat. Yan. Maraming salamat, Pastor Hazel, at sa PEPP para sa pagkakataon na magtalakay ako ng ilang mga usapin ukol sa kapayapaan. Ano? Paglilinaw lang, hindi ako theologian, kaya hindi perspektibong pang-theological ang ilalahad ko ngayon. I'm basically a historian at gusto ko lamang baybayin yung kasaysayan ng mga usapin kaugnay ng kapayapaan. Natutuwa ako na may isang gawain gaya ng hapong ito para sa mga kabataan. Muli, disclaimer, dati lang akong YS pero hindi na ngayon. So kung pananaw ang maipapakita, siguro pananaw ng tito ng mga kabataan ang maibibigay ko para sa hapong ito. No? Pwede kaya akong mag-screen share, naka-disable kasi para sa organizer. Bigyan ng kasi naka-disable yung screen sharing function. Meron lamang akong ipapalabas, i-share sa inyo na PowerPoint presentation. Ayan, yan, pwede na. Sige.
Okay na po. Yes po.
Ayan. Nakikita po ba?
Yes po.
Opo.
Para sa hapong ito, sorry. Sa hapong ito, ang binago ko ng kaunti yung aking panayam. Ano? At kapuna-puna na nasa wikang Filipino ito isa sa katuparan, binigyan ko ng bagong titulo ng pagsusulong ng kapayapaan batay sa katarungan, kalayaan at katwiran, isang pangkasaysayang suri. Bagaman pinakilala na ako'y historiador, na nagtuturo sa kagawaran ng kasaysayan ng Ateneo de Manila University, isang Katolikong Jesuitang paaralan. Ako ay isang laiko din, no? Kabahagi ng Iglesia Filipina Independiente. Bagaman ang lalahad ko ngayon ay hindi opisyal na pahayag ng anumang institusyong aking mga kinabibilangan. No? Kasama na rito yung institusyon ng mga guro ng Alliance of Concerned Teachers na kung saan kabahagi din ako, o ng Tanggol Kasaysayan, yung grupo ng mga historiador na nagsusulong ng pagpapalalim sa pag-unawang pangkasaysayan ng ating bayan. Nais kong bigyan ng pansin sa usapin ng pagsusulong ng kapayapaan sa kontekstong historikal at pangkasaysayan. Kailangan nating unang tanungin, no, kaninong kapayapaan ba ang ating binabanggit? No? Kasi maraming pagkakataon sa kasaysayan na kasaysayang hindi nakabatay sa pagbibigay kapangyarihan sa nakararami, kundi kasaysayang nakabatay sa kapangyarihan ng Estado. No? Kasaysayang nakabatay sa kapangyarihan ng naghaharing uri. No? Kaya kung titignan natin ang kapayapaan na tumataliwas doon sa kalakarang panlipunan na kinakikitaan ng pangingibabaw ng iilan at pagsasamantala ng nakararami. Kung mayroon tayong kailangang tanungin kaninong kapayapaan ba ito, kapayapaan sana ito para sa nakararami. No? Kapayapaan nakaugnay kung gayon sa kalayaang panlipunan. No? Kasi kung halimbawa, kapayapaan na simpleng walang armadong tunggalian, pero malawakan pa rin ang pagsasamantala sa nakararami, malawakan pa rin yung kawalan ng karapatan ng nakararami, malawakan pa rin ang kawalan ng kasarinlan ng mga mamamayan. Hindi ito tunay at makatarungang kapayapaan. Kaya nga kailangan nating pag-ibahin ang kapayapaan na nagmumula sa itaas, sinusulong ng mga nasa kapangyarihan na kapanatagan na walang tunggaliang bumabagabag sa kaayusang panlipunan na kinakakitaan ng pagsasamantala at pangingibabaw, o kaya kapayapaan ba na mula sa baba ng lipunan na nagbabangon sa dangal ng nakararami, nagbibigay ng karapatan, katarungan at katwiran sa pag-iral ng isang maayos na pamumuhay para sa nakararaming mga mamamayan. So kailangan nating pag-ibahin ito. No? Hindi ibig sabihin na nagkaroon ng tigil putukan, payapa na. No? Kasi kinakailangan palalimin ano ba talaga yung ugat, bakit nagkaroon ng tunggalian, lalo na armadong tunggalian, kaya may paghahanap ng kapayapaan. So kung halimbawa pinatigil mo lamang ang putukan kasi tinutukan mo yung katapat mo para tumahimik siya, kapayapaan ba ito? No? O kung halimbawang tumahimik na lamang, nanatili sa mga tahanan sa takot ng mga mamamayan na sila ay mapahamak, kapayapaan ba ito para sa nakararami? O kaya kapayapaan ba na tanggapin na lamang yung kalagayan ng pagsasamantala, pangingibabaw at kawalan ng pangangatwiran, no? At yung pagpapatuloy ng dominasyon, hindi lamang ng mga lokal na naghaharing uri kundi ng mga dayuhan sa isang lipunan, kapayapaan nga ba ito? No? So kailangan nating palalimin kaninong kapayapaan ba ito. At makikita natin maraming mga ganitong halimbawa sa kasaysayan. Magbabanggit lamang ako ng tatlo, no? Na mayroong epekto sa ating pag-iral bilang mamamayan, bilang sambayanan. Sa Latin ang kapayapaan ay pax, no? At yung kapayapaang panlipunan parang iniugnay sa isang kaayusan ng paghahari, no? Kaya mayroong halimbawa mababanggit nating Pax Romana, no? Na nagsasabing o sige, kailangang magkaroon ng kaayusan ng pagsasabatas, no? Napakalegalistiko ng mga Romano, no? Yung sinasabing ang Lex Romana na nagsasabing magkakaroon ng kapayapaan kung susunod sa batas sa kaayusang itinatakda ng mga estado at pagbibigay karapatan doon sa kinikilala ng estado na may karapatan. Pero kung susuriin natin yung Pax Romana ito o kapayapaan para sa may-aring alipin, may-ari ng mga alipin, mga may-ari-arian, mga mamamayan ng Roma, mga kalalakihan. Hindi saklaw ng Pax Romana ang mga kababaihan, ang mga alipin, ang mga migrante o hindi mga taong lagalag o hindi mamamayan ng Roma. So nakabatay ang kapayapaang ito sa pagpapalawak ng kaayusang Romano at pagpapailalim ng ibang bayan sa ganitong kaayusan. No? Kung susuriin natin sa kasaysayan, mahigit 500 taon mula Britanya hanggang kanlurang Asya, kasama ang Espanya, Pransya, Alemanya, Italia, Portugal, ay naging bahagi ng Imperyong Romana. At sinasabi nilang may Pax Romana dahil tumahimik o napatahimik yung mga walang karapatan. No? At nangibabaw yung mga naghaharing uri. Mas malapit sa ating kasaysayan yung sinasabing Pax Hispanica. No? Ang Iberian kingdoms ng Spain at Portugal ang siyang naging tagapagmana ng ideya ng Pax Romana. At sa pagpapalawak ng Espanya, ginamit niya yung ganitong prinsipyo rin. No? Paggamit ng kapayapaan, pagsusulong na tumahimik na lamang kayo at mapasailalim sa amin. No? Sa diwa halimbawa ng Reconquista, kasi kung susuriin natin yung kasaysayan ng Espanya, lalo na yung timog ng Espanya, sa halos 800 taon nasa ilalim ng mga Moro na mga Muslim ang timog ng Iberian Peninsula. No? At sa ganitong pagkakataon, nang magpakasal sina Fernando ng Aragon at Isabela ng Castile para mabuo yung imperyo ng Espanya, yung naging pamamaraan ng sinasabi nilang Pax Hispanica o konsolidasyon ng kapangyarihang Hispaniko ay yung para bawiin muli, masakop muli o rekonkista ang mga dating sa tingin nila ay kanilang bayan na sinakop o naging teritoryo ng mga Muslim. Kaya nga 1492 ay napakahalaga, crucial, hindi lamang sa world history dahil ito yung taon kung saan dumaong ang mga tripulanting kaugnay kay Christopher Columbus, kundi 1492 rin yung konsolidasyon ng Pax Hispanica, kung saan pinaalis ng nabubuong imperyong Espanya sa pagsasanib ng Aragon, Castilla at iba pang mga kaugnay na bayan gaya ng Catalunya at Galicia, at para mabuo ang Espanya, pinaalis nila ang mga Hudyo at ang mga Moro sa kanilang lupain. Pero yung rekonkista rin yung naging prinsipyo ng Pax Hispanica para sakupin ang ibang bayan, Latina America, Africa at Asia, kasama ang Pilipinas, no? Na nangangahulugan na kung sakaling may ilang mga mamamayan o mga nilalang, hindi pa mamamayan kundi maaring maging subheto ng hari ng Espanya na hindi Kristiyano o hindi Katoliko, kinakailangang mapaloob ito, maging redusido, yung konsepto ng reduksyon, bilang mga subheto ng hari, no? Yung patakaran ng reduksyon ay reduction of their status from free spirit, free willing individuals to subjects of the Spanish crown. So yun yung definisyon ng Pax Hispanica. Payapa kung tatanggapin mo yung relihiyong kolonyal, yung dominasyon ng mga dayuhan at integrasyon ng iyong lupain sa pandaigdigang imperyong sinusulong, no, ng Espanya. Sa pamamagitan ng patronato real, ang mga realdad o royalty, gaya ng mga hari at monarko ng Espanya, yung nagsilbing mga patron ng simbahan para isulong ang rekonkista at Pax Hispanica. Pero alam naman natin na hindi Pax o hindi talaga aktual na kapayapaan ito, no? Kapayapaan ito sa pananakop, payapa at panatag yung mga nangingibabaw. Pero kung kayo yung nasa receiving end ng pananakop, kayo yung nakaranas, halimbawa sa Latina America, halos sa 85 hanggang 70% ng inyong mga mamamayan ay mamamatay sa hinang kolonyalismo. O sa kaso ng Pilipinas, maraming mga bayan yung nawawalan ng sariling pagkakakilanlan dahil sa pagiging redusido nila at mapasailalim sa kolonyal na pamamahala. Yung ikatlong Pax, yung Pax Americana, no, na ginamit ng mga Amerikano para isulong yung kolonisasyong Amerikano, no? Mayroong digmaan yung konteksto ng paglalapat ng Pax Americana, no? May digmaang Amerikano-Espanyol, the Hispano-American War, na naging daan o hudyat para magpalawak ang Amerika, hindi lang sakupin o talunin ang mga Espanyol na nasa Cuba at Puerto Rico, kundi doon sa mga teritoryo ng Espanya sa Pasipiko. Kasama dito yung Carolinas, Marianas, kasama ang Guam, at Pilipinas. Kung gayon, sa konteksto ng digmaan, sinasabi niya na kung matatalo yung aking mga kalaban, sabi ng mga Amerikano, magkakaroon ng kapayapaan. Pero dito sa Pilipinas, nasa gitna tayo ng paghihimagsik. At sa himagsikang ito, sinusulong yung kalayaan ng bayan. Kaya tinignan na yung mga revolusyonaryong Pilipino na nagsusulong ng kalayaan ay bagabag o gambala sa kapayapaan ng Amerika, no? Yung Pax Americana. So dapat supilin ang mga ito dahil nakakagambala ito sa pagpapalawak ng Amerika sa bisa ng Pax Americana. So may sinabing nung July 4, 1901, yung Proclamation of Peace, sabi nila, kumampi na naman yung mga ilustradong gaya ni Aguinaldo, Benito Legarda, Andres de Luzuriaga, Trinidad Pardo de Tavera, Pedro Paterno. Kaya wala nang tumututol, wala nang bumabagabag. No? Sa bisa din ng tinatawag na Benevolent Assimilation Proclamation, may assertion pa nga, no, si William McKinley, yung dating Pangulo ng Amerika, na nagsabi na nanaginip siya at dinalaw daw siya ni Gabriel ang Arkanghel at sinabi, mensahe ng Diyos na sakupin ng Pilipinas para gawing sibilisado at kristyanisado ang kapuluan. No? Walang pagkilala doon sa, mahigit 300 taon ng Katoliko yung malaking bahagi ng kapuluan. Pero ang sabi nila, kristyanisasyon yung Pax Americana. Muli, kristyanisasyon na pagpapatahimik doon sa mga tumututol at yung interpretasyon o posisyong kristyanisasyon ay yung kristyanisasyong konserbatibo evangelikal. No? Yung mga tumututol dito ay papatawa ng iba't ibang batas na paghihigpit. Kung ikaw ay tumututol sa Pax Americana, papatawan ka ng batas sedisyon, halimbawa, na nagsasabing sino mang hindi sumusumpa sa katapatan sa Amerika ay ituturing na sedisyoso na maaring maipakulong, maipatapon o mabitay. So kahit na halimbawa nagsusulong ka lang ng kalayaan para sa Pilipinas, kung gayon hindi ka tapat sa pananakop ng Amerika, sedisyoso ka na at pwede ka nang bitayin. At kung magpapatuloy ka ng pakikipaglaban, hindi ka na ituturing na revolusyonaryo, kundi ituturing ka ng bandido sa bisa ng brigandage law. At para mapapayapa yung mga pamayanan, para hindi sila kumampi sa mga tumututol, armado man o hindi armado, tumututol sa pananakop ng mga Amerikano, magkakaroon ng mga concentration camps, no? Kung saan lilimitahan yung paggalaw ng mga mamamayan sa bisa ng reconcentration law. Kahit yung mga simbolo ng kalayaan, pagwawagayway ng bandila, pag-awit ng himno nasyonal, ay bawal sa bisa ng flag law. So, muli, katahimikan at kapayapaang nakabatay sa konsolidasyon ng kolonyal na estado at pagpapatahimik sa mga mamamayan yung kanilang konsepto ng kapayapaan. So, ito yung tatlong maari nating banggitin. Hindi ibig sabihin na ang estado ay nagsulong ng kapayapaan. Kapayapaan talagang ganap, makatarungan at para sa mga mamamayan na magtatagal para sa nakararami. Kung hindi, kapayapaan lamang, kagaya ng Pax Romana, Pax Hispanica at Pax Americana, kapayapaang isinusulong ng estado para sa pagpapanatili ng pangingibabaw at pagpapalawak, pananakop ng mga nasasakupang bayan at pagpapasailalim sa mga iba-ibang lipunan para sumunod at tumalima sa kanilang kaayusang isinusulong ng kanilang estado. Kung susuriin natin sa kasaysayan ng Pilipinas, mayroong ganitong mga parang pagpapaloob ng kasunduang pangkapayapaan, no? Na kailangan din nating paghalawan ng leksyon o aral. Kasi maraming mga pagkakataon na sinasabing, o sige, para sa ngalan ng kapayapaan, pumasok tayo sa kasunduan. At yung kasunduan ito, yung nagbigay, sabi nga ni Pastor kanina, ng ilusyon ng kapayapaan, pero hindi talaga makatarungan, ganap at laganap na magtatagal na kapayapaan. Magbibigay lang ako ng ilang halimbawa sa ating kasaysayan. No, una, ito alam naman natin, no, 500 taon ng magiging 500 taon sa 2065 yung sanduguan sa pagitan ni Miguel Lopez de Legazpi at ni si Katuna. No, ano yung sinasabi dito na kumuha sila ng dugo mula sa kanilang mga armas at pinaghalo ito at ininom nilang kapwa. So bilang kasunduan, sanduguan, payapa na dapat na mamumuhay ang mga mamamayan. Ano? Pero yung katanungan muli, kaninong kapayapaan ito? Ano? Kahit hanggang sa panahon ni Rizal at Bonifacio, tinatanong nila, tumalima ba ang mga Espanyol sa kasunduan sa pagitan ni Legazpi at si Katuna o tinalikuran na ito, no? Dahil yung kapayapaang nakabatay sa Pax Hispanica na tinalakay ko kanina at yung pagsusulong ng relihiyon, kung gayon yung pagbubura ng mga prekolonyal na mga tradisyon sa mga katutubong mga pamayanan, yung naging kinahinatnan ng ganitong kasunduan. So dahil hindi malinaw, ano ba yung pinagkakasunduan natin? Ano? Para kanino ba? At tungo saan ba yung pagkakaroon natin ng sanduguan? Baka mito lamang ito ng kasunduan, pero sa katunayan, ito ay pagpapahayag ng pangingibabaw ng mga Espanyol dito sa Pilipinas. No? Pumaloob yung ilang mga pinuno sa pag-aakalang makabubuti ito sa kanila. No? Isang bagay muli ito, no? Paano natin susuriin yung mga pamunuan ng bayan at yung kanilang papel sa pagpasok sa iba't ibang mga kasunduang pangkapayapaan. O baka naman sell out o pinagbibili na yung mga mamamayan dito. Hindi ko sinasabing alam ni si Katuna yung kahihinatnan. Ano? Siyempre, bago pa lang dating ang mga Espanyol. At yung sanduguan ay isang tradisyon, no? Sa kasaysayan ng mga prekolonyal na bayan sa Kapuluang Timog Silangang Asya. Maring din niya alam yung motibasyon ng pananakop ng mga Espanyol kaya siya pumaloob sa sanduguan. At maari ding iba yung pananaw ni Legazpi sa ganitong larangan na pakikipagkasundo. Baka ang pananaw niya ay sige, simulan na talaga ng kolonisasyon ang magiging bunga ng sanduguang ito. Sa Biak na Bato, ganoon din, no? Sa gitna tayo ng himagsikan, pero pumayag sina Emilio Aguinaldo sa pakikipagkasundo ni Pedro Paterno na mapatapon sa Hong Kong ang pamahalaang Aguinaldo, yun ngang Hong Kong Junta, magkabayaran at maghatian yung mga napatapon dito. Sabi nila baka pwedeng kahit nasa gitna tayo ng himagsikan, yung pamunuan ay tumalilis muna para nang sa gayon parang buying time and buying arms, no? Yung makukuhang danyos sa kabayaran sa kasunduan sa Biak na Bato ay maaring ipambili ng mga armas para nang sa gayon ay makapagpatuloy ng himagsikan sa hinaharap. Pero parang ang sinasabi, pagkakanulo ito ng pamunuan, no, na habang ang mga nasa rank and file ay nagpapatuloy ng paghihimagsik, nagpunta sa Hong Kong yung pamunuan. Sa katunayan may demandahan pa nga kung paano yung hatian ng pera at kanino mapupunta, saan gagastusin ng mga ito. So kailangan nating suriin din na kung may kasunduang pangkapayapaan, anong makauring batayan ang sinusulong nito, no? Ito ba ay kasunduan na kumakatawan lamang sa pananaw ng mga naghaharing uri sa lipunan? O ito ba ay tumitingin talaga sa kapakanan ng nakararami? O ganoon yung isang dilema na kinharap ni Macario Sakay. Nabanggit na natin yung benevolent assimilation, sedition law, pero kahit ganito, binansagang tulisan si Macario Sakay at ang Republika ng Katagalugan, sinabing yung armadong kilusan ay isang sedisyosong kilusan at dapat ng supilin. Nakumbinsi si Macario Sakay na magkaroon ng tigil putukan at bumaba mula sa kabundukan dahil sabi niya, nakumbinsi siya na baka mayroong pamamaraan para matamo ang kapayapaan at kalayaan sa pamamagitan ng 1907 election of the Philippine Assembly. Napaniwala ka, no? Na kung bababa sila at isusuko ang mga armas, magkakaroon na ng kapayapaan. Isa sa mga requirements ng Philippine Bill of 1902 na magkakaroon kapayapaan, ibig sabihin kawalan ng armadong paglaban sa mga Amerikano sa panig ng mga Filipino para maisulong ang eleksyon sa Asembleya ng Pilipinas. So napaniwala siya na kung meron palang Asembleya ay magkakaroon na ng kalayaan at kapayapaan. Pero anong nangyari? No? Una, binitay sina Sakay sa kasalanang sedisyon at yung ibang mga krimeng para sa mga kriminal talaga, no, gaya ng pagpatay, panggagahasa, pagnanakaw, no, ay ipinataw din sa kanila. Pero anong nangyari dun sa 1907 first Philippine National Elections for the Philippine Assembly? Naging eleksyon ito para sa mga lokal na naghaharing uri na wala rin tinig, walang kapangyarihan yung nakararami. So, napasuko si Sakay at hindi siya nagkanulo kundi sabi nga naloko, no, doon sa kasunduang pangkapayapaan na sa halip na magkaroon ng kalayaan ay nagbigay daan lamang sa konsolidasyon ng kolonyal na kapangyarihang Amerikano at konsolidasyon ng lokal na naghaharing uri para sa mga lokal na politika. Nabanggit na kanina ni Pastor yung aral sa kasunduang pangkapayapaan sa pagitan ng pamahalaan at kilusang HUK. No? Pero kailangan din nating isa konteksto ito. Bagaman isang kasunduan ang naganap, ang premise nito talaga tanggapin ng mga HUK na sila ay magsusurrender o susuko sa bisa ng amnestiya. Pero tignan natin, no, ano ba yung mga HUK, 'di ba? Ito yung pinagmulan ng kilusang bayan laban ng hukbong bayan laban sa mga Hapon, no? HUK Balahap na siyang nagsulong ng kilusang gerilyero laban sa pananakop ng mga Hapones. So bakit sila ngayon ay bibigyan ng amnestiya, isusuko ang armas at susuko sa ilalim sa pamahalaan, gayong wala naman silang kasalanan na isinakatuparan maliban na lamang doon sa gerilyerong kilusan laban sa mga pananakop ng mga Hapones. No, kaya nga yung katanungan, kung nagkaroon ba ng tigil putukan, sumuko yung sinasabing kalaban ng Estado, kapayapaan na ba ito? No? Makatarungang kapayapaan ba yung matatamo sa mga ito? So kailangan nating laging pagbantayan ang anumang kasunduan, anumang usapang pangkapayapaan na hindi tumitingin sa labas ng parametro ng tigil putukan at tigil ng armadong tunggalian. Hindi nangangahulugan na wala ng armadong tunggalian ay mayroon ng kapayapaan. Kung hindi tinutugunan, ano ba yung pinag-ugatan, bakit in the first place nagkaroon ng pag-aarmas yung mga tao? Sa karanasan itong mga kasunduang pangkapayapaan, maikli lamang na binaybay natin, hindi nito kinilala na kung hindi mo tutugunan yung batayang pangangailangan ng mga mamamayan, mauulit at mauulit pa rin yung armadong tunggalian, no? Sa mga susunod na pagkakataon. No? Kaya pwede nating sabihin, patapos na rin ito dahil nagmamadali na rin tayo at kulang na sa oras, ano yung kasalukuyang hamon sa kasunduang pangkapayapaan? Ano? Una, dapat tayong umalis at tumalilis dun sa framework. Binanggit na rin ito ni Pastor kanina, no, na dun sa parametro na dapat kailangan nating umalis dun sa parametro na ang kapayapaan ay makikita kung natalo na yung isang panig o hindi na nagkakaroon ng armadong tunggalian. Hindi ito magiging ganap, makatarungan, makatwirang kasunduang pangkapayapaan kung walang pagkilala sa mga batayang karapatan ng mga mamamayan. Kung walang pagkilala doon sa legitimasyon ng mga argumento ng mga magkatunggaling puwersa. Kung hindi tatagpo ang kaisipan ng mga nagtutunggali sa lipunan, magtagpo ng kaisipan para isulong yung karapatan ng mga mamamayan, lalo na yung karapatang pantao. Kung kapayapaan ito na nangangahulugan na pagpapatahimik ng isa at tampalasan sa karapatang pantao ng bawat ng mga natalo o na pangibabawang mga katunggali, hindi ito aktual na kapayapaan. No? Kahit na matapos ang armadong tunggalian, kung hindi tinutugunan yung kawalan ng batayang karapatan ng mga mamamayan, hindi pa rin matatapos ang usapang panlipunan at yung usapang pangkapayapaan. Ikalawa, bakit nagkakaroon ng armadong tunggalian? Hindi lamang dahil gusto lamang naming mag-armas o naniniwala lang kami doon sa personalistikong pamumuno ng mga leader namin. Hindi eh. Kundi dahil mayroong matibay, malawakan at malalim na di pagkakapantay-pantay sa kalagayang panlipunan ng mga mamamayan. Nakararami yung walang karapatang pangkabuhayan, walang kagalingang panlipunan na dapat ay bahagi ng kanilang pag-iral bilang mamamayan. So ang pagsusulong ng usaping pangkapayapaan ay dapat nasa parametro at konteksto din ng pagsusulong ng katarungang panlipunan. Kung, sige, napapayapa na tayo, hindi na nagwewelga yung mga manggagawa, pero alam naman natin na yung mga may-ari ng mga malalaking empresa nasa top 40, top 500 richest Forbes list. No? Hindi ito katarungang panlipunan na masasabi. Ikatlo, mahalagang banggitin na ang pagsusulong ng kapayapaan ay gaya nung nakita natin sa Pax Romana, Pax Hispanica, Pax Americana, at gaya rin ng nakita natin mula kay Sikatuna hanggang kay Makaaryo Sakay, hanggang sa mga hook, hanggang sa kasalukuyang usapin. Kapag hindi kinikilala na usapin ng soberanya ang kapayapaan, hindi magaganap, hindi magiging laganap, at hindi magiging makatwiran ang anumang pagsusulong ng kapayapaan. Kung tatahimik na lamang tayo para maagawan ng mga teritoryo ng mga dayuhan, o kung tatahimik na lamang tayo para manatiling nangingibabaw ang mga dayuhan sa ating ekonomiya at kalinangan at kultura, kung tatahimik na lamang para nang sa gayon ay magiging battleground ng mga malalaking mananakop na mga bansa ang ating kalupaan, hindi ito magdudulot ng ganap na kapayapaan. Kaya na ang pagsusulong ng kapayapaan ay pagsusulong din ng kasarinlang pambayan. Ngayon, panghuli, dahil ito ay pagtitipo ng mga taong simbahan at mga kabataan, kailangan nating akuin, no? Bilang mga bahagi ng ating kanya-kanyang mga simbahan, na ang usapin ng kapayapaan ay hindi lang usapin ng mga politiko, ng mga militar, ng mga pinuno. Ito ay usaping pambayan. At kung gayon, dahil ang ating simbahan ay bahagi ng lipunan at hindi natin maiaalis ang ating simbahan sa kalagayang panlipunan, bahagi yung usaping panlipunan ng kapayapaan sa dapat na isulong na usapin ng mga simbahan, no? At lalo na doon sa usapin, yan, naririnig na kaya ako. At lalo na doon sa usapin ng pagkakasangkot ng mga kabataan sa usapang pangkapayapaan. Bakit ganoon? Ano? Kasi hindi naghahanda ng usapang pangkapayapaan batay sa nakaraan. May mga leksyon tayo na dapat natutunan batay sa kasaysayan, pero hindi dapat tignan bilang bagahe ang nakaraan para sa pagsusulong ng kapayapaan. Kailangan nating tignan ng kasaysayan bilang gabay, bilang mga leksyon na magbibigay sa atin para nang sa ganon isulong yung kapayapaan. Pero hindi ito pagsusulong dahil mayroong nakaraan. Uy, may past pala sila. No? O kaya mayroon tayong kasalukuyang kalagayan. Ang pagsusulong ng kapayapaan ay paghahanda para sa hinaharap. Kung gayon, napakahalaga na paghahanda ito, ano yung magiging bisyon ng ating lipunan? ano ang kalagayan at kalakarang panlipunan na ating binabandila, ating isinusulong sa susunod na henerasyon. At kung gayon, napakahalaga na maging kasangkot ang mga kabataan at agenda ng kabataan ng usaping pangkapayapaan dahil hindi na yung nakaraang henerasyon ang nakasalalay, ang nakataya dito, kundi yung henerasyon ng mga kabataan ngayon at ng mga susunod pang henerasyon. Ano man yung magiging kalakaran, kahihinatnan ng mga usapang pangkapayapaan ay agenda ng mga kabataan. At yung agenda ng mga kabataan ang magtatakda ano yung kanilang pananaw, kanilang bisyon, kanilang punto de vista para makapagtayo ng higit na makatarungan, higit na makatwiran, higit na payapang lipunan. So ito yung panghuli. Maraming salamat para doon sa mga gustong makakuha ng kopya ng PowerPoint presentation na ito. Binigay ko kina Tita Ophel yung kopya pero pwede rin nyo rin akong bigyan ng email sa fgalogo@ateneo.edu. Nga pala, ako ay semi-regular columnist din sa bulatlat.com. Pakitignan yung balik-saysay. May ilan akong sanaysay ukol sa kasaysayan ng usaping pang kapayapaan na pwede nyong basahin. Free download nga pala ito. No? Promotion na. At may Facebook page din ang Tanggol Kasaysayan kung saan nagtatalakay kami ng ilang mga usaping pangkasaysayan sa kalagayan ng kasalukuyang henerasyon. No? Paano bibigyan ng perspektibong pangkasaysayan ang mga kasalukuyang kinakaharap ng ating lipunan. So muli, paumanhin at medyo ginagabi na tayo, nag-extend. Maraming salamat sa imbitasyon at mabuhay ang mga kabataan at isulong natin ang higit na makatarungang lipunan para sa kapayapaan. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat, Prof. Francis, ungkatan ng PAS. Salamat sa pagbibigay ng malinaw na pagpapaliwanag ng kapayapaan sa lente ng kasaysayan. Kasaysayan na ang nagsabi kung paano ang mga Pilipino ay nagsulong ng kapayapaan. Tayo din naman ay inaanyayahan na magsulong ng kapayapaan sa pamamagitan ng hamon at panawagan na ibalik at ituloy ang peace talks. Ang pagsulong ng kapayapaan, sabi ni Prof, ay pagsulong din ng katarungan. Ito ay usaping pambayan at tayo bilang mga taong simbahan ay bahagi ng lipunan. Kaya naman ang mga kabataan ay may malaking maiaambag sa usapin ng pangkapayapaan. Muli po, Professor Francis, maraming salamat po sa inyong pagbabahagi ng iyong panahon, ng iyong talento sa hapon na ito. Naniniwala po ako na we have reflections, comments, questions, at kung meron man po ay pwede namang ilagay natin sa chat box para at least makapagtanong tayo kung meron man ng isa o dalawang tanong. Baka po hindi tayo makatulog. Ayan, sige po. Kung wala naman, ay naibigay naman po ni Professor Francis ang kanyang email at saka ang kanyang Facebook account, at napaka-easy lang yun na i-message siya para sa ating mga questions, sa ating mga comments. At kung tayo ay naguguluhan pa rin o meron pa tayong mga katanungan tungkol sa kanya, tungkol sa kasaysayan, ay i-message lamang po natin siya. Ayan, sige po. Medyo nagmamadali na po tayo, no, because of our time sa ating limitasyon sa panahon. Pero bukas ay magkikita-kita pa rin naman tayo. At maaari, kung may mga tanong, bukas ay baka matalakay pa rin naman. Let us continue. Let us all together read the affirmation of faith. We believe in the God of Shalom, Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. We believe in the God who creates and recreates the world. We believe in the God who came to live among us, to bring liberation from all forms of bondage and slavery. We believe in the God who accompanies us in our journeys and struggles, on our pilgrimage to Shalom, the reign of God's peace, justice, and life abundant for all. Amen.
Mga tao sa kalibutan nagapuyo sa dagkong pagantos. Alam kanila ang kalistanan, iatubang sa kanunay o Diyos. Tindog tanang alagad ni Jesus, atong buhaton ang buhat sa Diyos. Daghan gayud ang nagadangoy-ngoy, sama usab ang anak pangupaw. Ilang pangandoy nga mawala na, ilang kagutom kasakit usab. Tindog tanang alagad ni Jesus, atong buhaton ang buhat sa Dios. Sa dapit nga may kagubot gayon, ang kinabuhi daw anay bili. Umuabot nga ang tamahan, ang putling gugma o kaluoy mo. Tindog tanang alagad ni Jesus, atong buhaton ang buhat sa Dios. Matapos untang pagbingkil karon, pagdaog-daog usab ingon man, ang pagigdait mo Haring o Dios, untang matuman ang pagbuot mo. Tindog tanang alagad ni Jesus, atong buhaton ang buhat sa Dios. Tindog tanang alagad ni Jesus, atong buhaton ang buhat sa Dios. Hinaut
To end our first day session, we would like to call Reverend Father Conegundo Garganta. Father,
Companion God, transform our minds and our whole being. Direct us always your way of peace and justice. Liberate us and our people that we may stand for what is right and just, and stand for the good and betterment of the lives of the masses. Help us see the needs of the least among us and widen our perspectives and visions as we confront the ills of our society. Strengthen us and embolden us that we may continue to work and contribute to your reign of justice and all the people feel in your time. May it be so.
Amen. Ayan po. Muli po, maraming salamat po sa mga naging bahagi ng ating pagtitipon ngayong araw na ito. Bukas po ay magkita-kita muli tayo sa ganap na 2:00 ng hapon. At naniniwala po ako na mula sa ating mga participants ay marami po tayong natutunan sa hapon na ito. At naniniwala din po ako na ang mga natutunan natin ngayong hapon na to ay hindi lamang maikulong dito sa ating online forum, bagkus ay lalabas tayo para ating magamit ang lahat ng ating mga natutunan. Muli, maraming salamat sa ating mga naging tagapagsalita at iba pang moderator ng gawain na ito.
Ilang photo ops?
At mag-photo ops daw po tayo, sabi ni Tita Open. I-open po natin ang ating mga camera kung kakayanin ng ating internet. At kung pwede, tanggalin po natin yung ating PowerPoint na para makita. Yan, salamat po. Sino po kukuha? Tek?
Ako na.
Okay.
Sige po, wide smile. Yan, kahit medyo pagoda na at hagada versosa. Sige po, bali 4 na beses po kayong mag-smile Sige po, yan po. 1, 2, 3. Bongga. Next po. 1, 2, 3. Bongga. Isa pa po. 2 pa pala. Ayan. 1, 2, 3. Hello sa mga nasa groups. Ang dami rin pong mga nasa church, nasa groups. Last one po. 1, 2, 3. Alright. Ayan. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat po. Kita-kita po tayo bukas muli.
Salamat. Si Prof. Minuriel, hello po.
Naka-live pa po tayo Si Kai. Yan. Sige po, pwede na po tayong bumati. Kung gusto nating batiin ng ating mga kakilala, mga friends.
Hello po sa UP Sugbo. Social distancing po. Sa Pro Cathedral pa. IFI Agusan, IFI.
Ayo.
Master Kid,
Power.
Power ang CD. Oh, hi.
Power yung mga naka-grouping.
Itong mga youth ko to.
IFI, Brother Ian for love.
Hi, Master G.
Hello, Bishop Dindo.
Hello po, Bishop Dindo.
Hello, babakayo.
Ay, snap.
Ganito pala. Napi.
Please be with us po. Fan pala si Snap.
See you tomorrow. Or paano si Snap? Salamat.
May fan base ka, Snap.
Hindi po. Natay po.
Baka ibig subong kogon! Alay po, walang forever sa ibig subong kogon. Bye-bye, video!
Sugar, saba kay ka.
Bukas! Never ka ka!
Thank you for watching. Hi, Ate Snap. Bukit ng Luisa.
Thank you po. Ay, Cirilo!
Party Emel! Party Emel! Emel!
Ay, Cirilo! Cirilo!
Ang gugulo nyo! Laga na gwapa ko!
Ay, activity pala to. Bongga.
Nadayon!
Oo.
Love is open.
Oo nga eh.
Babay na.
Bye, Patpat!
Bye!
Ay, oo.
Ating first and foremost sa Ikam. Salamat po. Tomorrow, pa sa itong second and fourth, pa sa tuwang kuan, Ikam, sa University of Babay. Sige, dula. Bongkogan!
Yipi sa Bongkogon! Party sa ML. Sarap lang. Ay, sa Bongkogon! Guwapa din eh.
Papa.
Alam sa TikTok.
Okay, see you po sa ating virtual game. Kamustahan mo maya, 7 p.m.
Party Emel.
PCBO, kita-kita po ngayon mamaya 7 p.m. para sa itong virtual kamustahan.
God!